5 plants are growing across the world right now. A single herb destroys bacteria that no prescribed antibiotic can touch anymore. A forgotten root reverses gut damage in weeks, while every manufactured antibiotic only makes it worse. A wild vine eliminates intestinal parasites overnight without costing a single cent to grow. And 2 of them were used by traditional healers for centuries before they were quietly erased from every medical textbook in the Western world. And by the end of this video, you will know all of them and the exposed research the supplement industry hopes you never find. Right now, more than 1,200,000 people die every single year from infections that antibiotics can no longer treat. That number comes directly from The Lancet, published in 2022. The bacteria evolved. The drug stopped working. And every time a doctor prescribes a broad-spectrum antibiotic, it does not just attack the infection. It destroys the entire gut microbiome. The beneficial bacteria that regulate your immune system, your digestion, your mood, your nutrient absorption, all wiped out in a single course. Recovery takes months. Sometimes the gut never fully recovers, but 2 plants exist with peer-reviewed evidence showing they kill pathogenic bacteria selectively while leaving beneficial gut flora intact. That is the exact opposite of how antibiotics work. Neither plant can be patented. Today, on Secrets Beneath Nature, we cover both in full. Their science, their history, how to use them. Then we name 5 entire categories of plants the pharmaceutical industry has spent decades racing to replace with synthetic versions. But first, there is a vine growing wild across 3 continents right now that purges intestinal parasites overnight. It costs nothing, and it was quietly removed from folk medicine the moment a patentable pill could do the same job. The vine is called bitter melon, Momordica charantia. It belongs to the same family as cucumbers and squash. It climbs fences across Southeast Asia, Central America, East Africa, and the Caribbean. It self-seeds in disturbed soil. Nobody plants it on purpose anymore, and it keeps showing up anyway. In Ayurvedic medicine, mothers brewed the leaves into strong tea. In the Caribbean, bush doctors prepared the unripe fruit as a decoction. Children drank it on an empty stomach, and intestinal parasites were expelled within hours. In 2005, Biome and colleagues published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, confirming that bitter melon extracts showed direct vermifugal activity against common intestinal helminths. The science validated what grandmothers already knew. Then, in the 1970s, the World Health Organization began recommending pharmaceutical anthelmintics as first-line treatments. A free vine growing on a chain-link fence generates 0 revenue. A patented tablet does. Bitter melon is still growing wild today, still free, still effective, still absent from every Western medical reference. That pattern repeats with every plant you are about to see, starting with the single herb, so common you have probably used it 100 times this year without once considering it. Medicine. You know this plant. You have sprinkled it on pasta. You have shaken it onto roasted vegetables. It is oregano, Oreganum vulgare. And the distance between what you think it is and what the research proves it can do is one of the widest gaps in modern medicine. The primary compound in oregano essential oil is carvacrol. In 2002, Ulte and colleagues at the University of Groningen published in Applied and Environmental Microbiology, showing that carvacrol punches holes directly through bacterial cell membranes. It does not target a metabolic pathway the way antibiotics do. It physically tears the wall apart. Bacteria cannot develop resistance to having their structural walls destroyed. There is no mutation that fixes a torn membrane. In 2007, Nostro and colleagues showed that carvacrol dismantled Staphylococcus aureus biofilms at concentrations below 1%. Biofilms are the protective shields bacteria build when standard antibiotics fail. Hospitals spend billions trying to break through them. Oregano oil does it in a petri dish. Thapa and colleagues at the University of Brighton in 2012 tested oregano essential oil against Clostridium difficile, one of the most dangerous hospital-acquired gut infections that kills nearly 30,000 Americans per year. Oregano oil inhibited it. But the study that should have changed everything came from Force and colleagues in 2000. They gave emulsified oregano oil to patients infected with Blastocystis hominis and Entamoeba histolytica. 600 milligrams daily for 6 weeks. 77% of patients were completely cleared. And here is what separates oregano from every antibiotic on the pharmacy shelf. Bukovska and colleagues demonstrated that carvacrol reduces gut inflammation and supports mucosal integrity. Basole and Giuliani confirmed in 2012 that oregano compounds selectively suppress pathogenic bacteria while leaving beneficial lactobacillus strains intact. It kills the harmful bacteria, protects the good bacteria, heals the gut lining. No broad-spectrum antibiotic does all three. You can use it as oil of oregano in emulsified drops. Brew fresh leaves into strong tea. Use dried oregano generously in daily cooking. Infuse it into raw honey for respiratory infections. Oregano grows wild across the Mediterranean hillsides of Greece. Turkey and Italy. It self-seeds, it costs nothing, and it cannot be patented. No patent means no pharmaceutical company funds the trials required for FDA approval. The science exists. The barrier is not evidence. The barrier is economics. Oregano destroys harmful bacteria and protects the gut. But now we come to the forgotten root with an even more dramatic story. The plant that indigenous nations used as their primary antibiotic for centuries. The plant whose key compound was tested against MRSA, the superbug that pharmaceutical medicine was designed to defeat and failed. The Cherokee Nation used this root to treat every infection their people faced. Open wounds packed with the powdered root, gut infections treated with bitter tea. European settlers documented its effectiveness as early as the 1700s. The plant is goldenseal, Hydrastis canadensis, a woodland perennial native to the forests of eastern North America. Its key compound is berberine, an alkaloid concentrated in the bright yellow root. That same compound is now sold in supplement stores for $30 to $50 per month by companies with no interest in telling you it comes from a plant that grows in partial shade in damp forest soil. In 2005, you and colleagues published in the Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, showing that berberine demonstrated direct activity against methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus at achievable oral doses. MRSA kills more Americans per year than emphysema. A plant root compound from the Appalachian forest floor succeeded where the most advanced drugs in history could not. But what makes goldenseal extraordinary is what it does after the infection is gone. Zhang and colleagues published in 2012 showing that berberine restructured gut microbiota, increasing bifidobacterium and lactobacillus populations while suppressing pathogens. Habdamarium confirmed in 2020 that berberine functions as a prebiotic-like compound, selectively feeding beneficial gut bacteria. Every hospital antibiotic destroys the microbiome as collateral damage. Goldenseal does the opposite. It eliminates the threat and rebuilds what was lost. Rabbani and colleagues showed in 1987 that berberine reduced bacterial diarrhea volume by 48%, faster than the pharmaceutical standard of care. You can take goldenseal root powder in capsules at 500 milligrams 2 to 3 times daily. Brew the dried root into tea. Use standardized berberine extract for targeted gut restoration. Prepare a topical root wash for wounds, exactly as Cherokee healers did 300 years ago. The full arc tells you everything about how the system works. Used by indigenous nations for centuries. Over-harvested until listed as at risk. Dismissed as folk superstition. Then the active compound was isolated, validated in peer-reviewed journals, and sold back to consumers at enormous markup. The plant was abandoned. The profit was extracted. 2 plants. Exposed science, exposed economics. But the pattern does not stop here. More plants were found to have challenged the supplement industry.
When you get a bacterial infection, the path is often automatic. You call the doctor, you sit in the waiting room, and you might get a prescription. On average, Americans are prescribed antibiotics less than once per year. The assumption behind every single one of those visits is that antibacterial power requires a laboratory, a patent, and a supply chain stretching across continents. That is what we were all taught. That is what most people still believe. But for 4,000 years on every inhabited continent, human beings treated bacterial infections with plants that grew within walking distance of their front doors, not as folk superstition, not as desperate last resorts, as primary medicine, as the first thing a healer reached for when someone showed up with an infected wound or a fever that would not break. And in the last 30 years, modern laboratory research has quietly confirmed what those civilizations understood. Certain plants contain compounds that destroy bacteria through mechanisms almost identical to the ones pharmaceutical antibiotics use. Some of those plants are growing in your yard right now. You have probably mowed over them this month. You may have pulled them out and tossed them in the compost pile last weekend. We spent months going through the research to find the 11 that matter most. 11 plants, 11 different antibacterial mechanisms, thousands of years of documented use across cultures that never communicated with each other and still arrived at the same conclusions. And every single one of them available for free within walking distance of most homes in America and Europe and Asia. Some of them are perennials that come back every year without replanting. Some of them are weeds that grow without anyone's permission. A few of them you can find tomorrow morning without leaving your own property. Here is what no one told you. Every kitchen in America has a spice rack, and almost every spice rack has a small jar of dried oregano sitting somewhere between the garlic powder and the paprika. You shake it onto pizza, you stir it into pasta sauce. You have probably never once thought of it as medicine. But oregano contains a compound called carvacrol, and carvacrol does something that would cost you hundreds of dollars to achieve at a pharmacy. It destroys bacterial cell membranes. It punctures the outer wall of the bacteria, and the bacteria dies. Laboratory tests showed that oregano oil inhibited the growth of Staphylococcus aureus at rates comparable to standard pharmaceutical antibiotics. Not similar, comparable. Staphylococcus aureus is the bacteria behind staph infections. It fills hospital wards. It drives thousands of emergency room visits every year across the United States, and the compound that fights it grows in a clay pot on a kitchen windowsill. Greek shepherds knew this 2,000 years ago. When a sheep got a wound in the mountains above the Aegean Sea, the shepherd packed oregano leaves into the cut. When a child scraped a knee in a village on the island of Crete, the grandmother reached for oregano before anything else. The word oregano itself comes from 2 Greek words, oros meaning mountain and ganos meaning joy, mountain joy. They were not naming a pizza topping. They were naming a medicine that grew wild on every hillside they could see. A bottle of oregano essential oil costs $8 to $15 and lasts for months. Common first-line pharmaceutical antibiotics used to treat standard staph infections are widely available as generics, and typically cost less than $20 for a full course. The oregano plant itself is a perennial. Plant it once in zones 5 through 10, and it comes back every single year. Free medicine, every spring, no prescription required. But oregano was only the beginning, because right next to it, on that same spice rack, there is another herb that contains the exact same antibacterial compound, plus a second one that oregano does not have. That herb is thyme. And thyme carries both thymol and carvacrol, two antibacterial mechanisms in a single plant. Research tested thyme essential oil against 120 different strains of bacteria collected from patients with infections of the mouth, the lungs, and the urinary tract. It was effective across the board. Here's the part that should make you pause. One of the active ingredients in Listerine mouthwash is thymol, a compound structurally identical to the one found in thyme, though modern commercial manufacturing primarily relies on synthetic thymol. They built a brand around it. They have been selling it back to you for 150 years. The plant it came from costs $3 at any garden nursery in the country. Ancient Egyptians understood this power long before any corporation did. They used thyme in their embalming process because they recognized that it stopped bacterial decomposition of human tissue. They did not have microscopes. They did not have laboratories. They watched what happened when thyme touched dead flesh, and they drew the correct conclusion. Oregano and thyme work through their essential oils, but there is a third plant sitting in almost every kitchen in the world that fights bacteria through an entirely different mechanism. And this one the military used as battlefield medicine when the real antibiotics ran out. You know garlic. You cook with it. You buy it by the bulb at any grocery store for less than $1. But garlic contains a sulfur compound called allicin that is released the instant you crush a clove. That sharp smell when you press garlic under a knife is allicin entering the air, and allicin attacks bacteria differently than oregano or thyme. It disrupts the enzymes bacteria need to survive. This means that bacteria resistant to one of these plants may still fall to another. 3 kitchen herbs, 3 different kill mechanisms. Louis Pasteur, the French chemist who discovered that germs cause disease, documented garlic as an antibacterial agent in 1858. That was more than 160 years ago, during World War I and again during World War II, when antibiotic supplies ran dangerously low on the front lines. Field medics in multiple armies packed crushed garlic directly into soldiers' wounds. The Soviet military used garlic so extensively during World War II that it earned a nickname across the entire Red Army. They called it Russian penicillin. Soldiers carried cloves of garlic in their pockets the way American soldiers carried sulfa powder. But the modern research is what should really stop you in your tracks. Laboratory studies have shown that isolated concentrated allicin extracts can inhibit MRSA in petri dishes. However, consuming or topically applying whole garlic does not deliver a stable or high enough concentration of a lysine to treat a systemic or deep tissue MRSA infection in humans. 3 plants from your kitchen, 3 different ways to kill bacteria. Exposed to the open air for thousands of years of human history, tested in modern laboratories and confirmed, and you have probably had all 3 in your home for decades without knowing any of this. So the question changes, if the science is this clear, if the history stretches back this far, if the results have been confirmed again and again, then why has no doctor ever mentioned it? Why has no pharmacy ever stocked oregano oil next to the amoxicillin? Why has no insurance company ever covered a $3 thyme plant as a preventive measure? The answer is not complicated, it is just uncomfortable. The global antibiotic market generates $42 billion every single year. In the United States alone, pharmacies fill over 236 million antibiotic prescriptions annually. Every one of those prescriptions passes through a system that includes a pharmaceutical manufacturer, a distributor, a pharmacy chain, and an insurance company. Every link in that chain takes a cut. Every link in that chain depends on you walking through the door and paying. Picture the fluorescent lights of your local pharmacy. Picture the white paper bag stapled shut with the receipt. Picture the line of people waiting to hand over their credit cards. That is a $42 billion system operating exactly as designed. A plant that grows itself in a backyard cannot generate a prescription. A compound that exists freely in nature cannot be patented. An herb that self-seeds every spring cannot create repeat customers. Research funding in the Western world flows toward patentable outcomes because patentable outcomes generate returns for investors. Universities pursue grants from pharmaceutical sponsors because pharmaceutical sponsors have the money. The plants that work for free receive almost no funding, not because they do not work, because they do not profit anyone. Tens of thousands of studies exist on synthetic antibiotics. A tiny fraction of that number exist on plant-based antimicrobials. That ratio does not reflect effectiveness, it reflects economics. Meanwhile, antibiotic resistance is now killing over 1 million people globally per year. The World Health Organization has called it a top 10 global health threat. The system that ignored these plants is now struggling to keep its own drugs working. But the pharmaceutical industry's disinterest does not change what grows in your yard. There are 8 more plants on this list, and the next one was used by Native Americans for more conditions than any other plant in their entire healing tradition. Echinacea grows wild across the prairies of the central United States. Purple cone flower is what most people call it when they see it growing along roadsides in Kansas and Nebraska and the Dakotas. Its bright purple petals and raised orange center make it one of the most recognizable wildflowers on the Great Plains. For more than 400 years before any European set foot on this continent, the Cheyenne used echinacea for sore throats. The Lakota used it for pain and infection. The Pawnee used it for headaches. No other single plant in the entire Native American pharmacopoeia was used for as many different conditions. Healers passed this knowledge down through oral tradition across generations. It was considered one of the most important medicines a community could possess. European settlers ignored it for centuries. Then in 1989, Germany's Commission E, which functions as the German equivalent of the FDA for herbal products, officially approved echinacea for treating upper respiratory infections. The supplement industry suddenly paid attention. Within 2 decades, echinacea became a $1.3 billion global market. Capsules, tinctures, teas, gummies, all sold back to consumers at premium prices. The indigenous peoples who discovered and refined this knowledge over 4 centuries received nothing from that market. But echinacea does not just boost immune response the way most supplement labels claim. Research has shown that it contains compounds that directly inhibit bacterial growth, particularly the bacteria that cause respiratory infections. The plant that the Lakota reached for when someone could not breathe turns out to attack the bacteria responsible through mechanisms that modern instruments can now measure and confirm. The next plant has an even longer record, 4,000 years longer. In India, in villages and cities and rural clinics stretching from Kerala to Kashmir, when someone gets a cut or a scrape, the first thing that often comes out is not a bandage. It is a bright orange powder, turmeric. Ayurvedic medicine has documented turmeric as a wound treatment since 2000 BCE. Indian mothers still apply turmeric paste to their children's scrapes before reaching for anything else. 4 billion people live in cultures that treat turmeric as medicine first and a cooking spice second. Western nutrition classified it the other way around. Turmeric contains curcumin, and curcumin does something that even many pharmaceutical antibiotics struggle to accomplish. It disrupts bacterial biofilms. Biofilms are the protective shields that bacteria build around themselves when they colonize a wound or an organ. They are the reason some infections become chronic. They are the reason certain antibiotics fail even when the bacteria should be vulnerable. The bacteria hide behind the biofilm and the drug cannot reach them. Curcumin breaks those shields open. It strips the armor off the bacteria and exposes them. Turmeric root costs roughly $2 per pound at any Asian grocery store in America. It grows outdoors in zones 8 through 11 and indoors in a pot anywhere else. The pharmaceutical industry has spent billions trying to develop synthetic biofilm disruptors. The answer has been sitting in the spice aisle for 4,000 years. Now, here is where the pattern gets personal. There is a plant called goldenseal that grows wild in the forests of eastern North America. From the Appalachian Mountains down through Ohio and into the river valleys of Kentucky and Tennessee, goldenseal has been part of the forest floor for as long as anyone can remember. The Cherokee used it for skin infections. The Iroquois used it for digestive illness and eye inflammation. And inside this plant, there is an alkaloid called berberine. If you walk into any health food store right now and look at the supplement aisle, you will find berberine capsules selling for $30 to $60 a bottle. Berberine has been shown effective against Streptococcus, E. coli, and Pseudomonas. The supplement industry extracted this compound from goldenseal, packaged it in capsules, and put it on shelves with a barcode and a markup. The plant itself grows wild in forests you can walk into for free. But here is the bitter part. European settlers learned about goldenseal from indigenous peoples and then harvested it so aggressively that goldenseal is now listed as endangered or threatened in multiple states. They took the knowledge, they took the plant, and now they sell the molecule back to you in a bottle. The label will not mention goldenseal. The label will not mention the Cherokee. The supply chain exists specifically to disconnect you from the source. The next plant carries a name that sounds like mythology, Achillea millefolium, named after Achilles. The legend says the Greek hero packed this plant into the wounds of his soldiers during the siege of Troy. Most legends exaggerate. This one understated. Yarrow contains over 120 identified bioactive compounds. Modern wound care science is still trying to replicate in a lab what this single plant does naturally in a meadow. During World War I, when medical supplies ran low in the trenches of France and Belgium, field medics turned to yarrow as a wound treatment. They crushed the leaves, packed them into open wounds, and watched infections slow down and stop. In Sweden and Norway, traditional healers had been using yarrow poultices for wound infections for over 800 years. The Swedish common name for yarrow translates loosely to field surgeon's herb. They named the plant after what it did, and today yarrow is classified as a common weed across most of the United States. It grows in ditches along Route 66. It grows in the median strips of suburban highways. It grows in unmowed fields and neglected vacant lots from Maine to California. It is drought-tolerant, self-spreading, and almost impossible to kill. A plant that treated battlefield infections in the trenches of World War I grows in the crack of your sidewalk, and you have been stepping over it your entire life. 7 plants so far. 7 different mechanisms for killing bacteria, thousands of years of use across dozens of cultures, and we are not finished. The final 4 include something that is not even technically a plant, a berry that Hippocrates himself called his medicine chest, and a weed so common you have certainly stepped on it this week. Rosemary is an evergreen shrub. Millions of American homes have one growing in the front yard or beside the porch as a decorative landscape plant. Walk through any neighborhood in Southern California or Texas or the Carolinas, and you will see rosemary hedges lining driveways and bordering garden beds. It smells pleasant. It looks nice trimmed into a shape. Most homeowners think of it as ornamental and nothing more. But during the Black Death in medieval Europe, when plague swept through cities from London to Florence and killed a third of the population, Europeans burned rosemary inside hospital wards and sick rooms. There's a famous legend about a group of grave robbers during the plague who managed to loot the dead without getting sick. Their secret was said to be a vinegar infused with rosemary and several other herbs. Historians call it 4 thieves' vinegar. They did not understand the chemistry, they understood the result. Rosemary contains 2 compounds called carnosic acid and rosmarinic acid. Both have confirmed antibacterial activity against Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus subtilis, and E. coli. You may have a rosemary bush in your front yard right now that you have been trimming for years and never once considered as medicine. It is not decoration. It is an antibacterial shrub disguised as landscaping. Now, for something most people have never heard of, if you have ever hiked through a damp forest in the Pacific Northwest, or through the mountains of Appalachia, or through the woodlands of Northern Europe, you have seen it. It looks like pale green hair hanging from tree branches. Most hikers assume it is dead moss or some kind of fungal growth. It is neither. It is called Usnea, and it is a lichen, a symbiotic organism that is part fungus and part algae, and it produces one of the most potent antibacterial compounds found anywhere in nature. The compound is called Usnic acid. Research has documented Usnic acid as effective against Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. That last one is the bacterium that causes tuberculosis, a disease that still kills over 1 million people worldwide every single year. Ancient Greek healers used Usnea, ancient Chinese healers used Usnea, ancient Egyptian healers used Usnea. 3 civilizations on 3 different continents, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all arrived at the same conclusion about the same organism independently. Here is what should infuriate you. Modern European pharmaceutical companies have filed patents on Usnic acid formulations for use in wound dressings and antibacterial products. They patented a compound produced by a lichen that hangs free on trees in public forests that anyone can walk into. The organism manufactures Usnic acid at no cost. It has been doing so for millions of years. The corporation charges you for the privilege of accessing what the forest already provides. Usnea is not cultivated. It is foraged. Look for it on dead or fallen branches in humid forests. It is abundant where it grows. A single afternoon of careful gathering provides enough material for a year of tinctures and wound preparations. Hippocrates lived in ancient Greece around 400 BCE. He is called the father of Western medicine. Every doctor who has ever taken the Hippocratic Oath is invoking his name and his principles. And Hippocrates called the elder tree his medicine chest. That was 2,400 years ago. For 24 centuries after that, European healers used elderberry as a frontline treatment for infections and fevers. Elderberry was not one remedy among many. It was the first thing reached for. Modern research has confirmed what Hippocrates observed. Elderberry contains compounds that show antiviral activity in laboratory settings. While some clinical trials suggest elderberry supplements may help reduce the duration and severity of common cold and flu symptoms, the clinical evidence remains mixed, and it does not cure viral infections. The evidence is strong enough that elderberry supplements now fill an entire section of most pharmacies and health food stores. By 2023, the elderberry supplement market hit $280 million. Gummies, syrups, capsules, lozenges, every form you can imagine, all of it extracted and processed and packaged from a berry that grows wild on roadsides, in hedgerows, and along riverbanks across North America and Europe. Drive through rural England or the back roads of upstate New York or the river valleys of Oregon in late summer, and you will see elder trees heavy with clusters of dark purple berries. Nobody planted them. Nobody tends them. Elder trees produce berries every single year without fertilizer, without irrigation, without any human input at all. The tree asks nothing. The supplement industry intercepts the fruit and sells it back to you in a plastic bottle with a barcode. And now the last one. This is the plant that brings everything full circle. This is the one that should change the way you look at your own lawn. It is not the banana. The word plantain refers to 2 completely different plants, and most people only know the tropical fruit. But Plantago major is something else entirely. It is a flat, low-growing weed with ribbed oval leaves that press close to the ground. It grows in every lawn. It grows in every sidewalk crack. It grows in every neglected garden bed and every patch of compacted soil in the temperate world. You have stepped on it this week. You have mowed over it this month. You may have sprayed it with herbicide last spring trying to get rid of it. plantain weed contains two compounds called aucubin and allantoin. Both have documented antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. When applied to cuts, scrapes, insect bites, and minor skin infections, plantain draws out infection and accelerates tissue repair. Herbalists call it nature's band-aid, and for once, that is not an exaggeration. The Anglo-Saxons listed plantain among the 9 sacred herbs over 1,000 years ago. Shakespeare referenced it as a wound healer in his plays. Indigenous peoples across North America, South America, and Asia all discovered plantain's antimicrobial properties completely independently of each other. When 3 separate continents arrive at the same conclusion about the same plant without any communication between them, that is not folklore. That is not coincidence. That is consensus built across thousands of years of human observation. And this is the plant that makes the whole story personal. Not an exotic herb you need to order online, not a supplement you need to buy from a health food store, not a tincture you need to brew from foraged lichen. The weed under your feet, the one growing between the bricks of your patio, the one you have been paying money to poison with weed killer while simultaneously paying a pharmacy for antibacterial ointment to put on your skin. The answer was pushing through the concrete of your own driveway, and you were spraying it with chemicals to make it go away. 11 plants: oregano, thyme, garlic, echinacea, turmeric, goldenseal, yarrow, rosemary, usnea, elderberry, plantain. 11 different ways to fight bacteria. Thousands of years of documented use across dozens of cultures, from ancient Greece to feudal Japan to the Cherokee Nation to villages in Kerala. Every single one of them confirmed by modern science. Every single one of them available for free or close to it. The pharmaceutical industry generates $42 billion a year selling antibiotics. These 11 plants generate zero revenue for that industry. That is the reason you were never taught their names in school. That is the reason no doctor has ever scribbled oregano oil on a prescription pad. That is the reason no television commercial has ever told you to go outside and pick the plantain growing next to your mailbox. You cannot bill for something that grows itself, but the plants do not care about billing codes. They do not care about revenue streams or quarterly earnings or shareholder value. They care about one thing: growing. They have been growing for thousands of years before the first pharmacy ever opened its doors. They grew through wars and plagues and famines and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Oregano still climbs the hillsides above the Aegean. Yarrow still fills the meadows of Scandinavia. Plantain still pushes through concrete in every city in the world. They are growing right now while you are watching this. And they will keep growing long after the last prescription is filled. You know their names now, you know what they do, you know where they grow, and you know why nobody told you before today. That knowledge, once it is in your hands, cannot be taken back. No corporation can unlearn it for you. No system can make you forget what you just heard. The information is yours now, and the plants are waiting. They always have been. Walk into an American pharmacy without insurance, and the cost of cutting-edge or brand-name antibiotics can easily range from dozens to hundreds of dollars. Even common generic antibiotics face price fluctuations due to supply chain shortages. The system is breaking from both ends simultaneously. The drugs are becoming less effective and more expensive at the same time. Hospitals are running out of options for patients carrying resistant infections. Doctors are watching antibiotics that worked perfectly a decade ago fail in the petri dish right in front of them. The World Bank estimates that antimicrobial resistance will cost the global economy $1 trillion in additional healthcare costs by 2050. Trillion. That is the world you are living in right now, and nobody in a position of authority has ever told you what your great-grandmother already knew. For over 4,000 years before antibiotics existed, every civilization on Earth treated bacterial infections with plants, not with hope, not with prayer, with chemistry, specific compounds in specific plants that killed specific bacteria. Ancient Egyptian physicians documented plant-based infection treatments in the Ebers Papyrus around 1500 BCE. Chinese scholars compiled the Shenong Ben Cao Jing around 200 AD, listing dozens of plants with antibacterial properties. Indian Ayurvedic texts dating back nearly 4,000 years described infection treatments using roots and leaves that modern science has only recently begun to validate. Antibacterial. These were not primitive guesses. These were observations refined across thousands of years and tested on millions of patients across dozens of civilizations. When a remedy failed, the patient died and the remedy was abandoned. What survived those millennia of brutal testing was the chemistry that actually worked. Modern researchers have now taken those same plants into controlled laboratories. They tested them using the exact same methods used to evaluate pharmaceutical antibiotics: minimum inhibitory concentration tests, bacterial membrane assays, biofilm disruption experiments. The same standards, the same protocols, the same instruments. What they found should have changed everything. Several of these plant compounds matched or outperformed pharmaceutical antibiotics against drug-resistant bacteria in laboratory settings. Some showed effectiveness against MRSA, the superbug that terrifies hospitals worldwide. And here's the part that changes the entire equation. Bacteria develop resistance to these plant compounds far more slowly than to synthetic antibiotics. In some laboratory models, bacteria struggle to develop resistance to these complex natural mixtures compared to isolated synthetic drugs. Because a whole plant extract contains dozens of active compounds attacking at once, it is much harder for bacteria to evolve a quick genetic workaround. These are not exotic species from remote jungles requiring expensive expeditions to find. These are plants that grow in pots on apartment balconies. Plants you can buy at any garden center for $3. Plants that some of you already have sitting on your kitchen counter right now without any idea what they are truly capable of. There are 5 of them. Before you hear the names, there is something you need to understand first. There is a reason you have never heard this information framed this way, and that reason is not complicated. It is economics. A pharmaceutical antibiotic can be patented. A patented molecule generates exclusive revenue for 20 years. That exclusivity funds the research, the marketing, the sales force, and the lobbying that keeps the entire system running. A plant compound that has existed in the public domain for 4,000 years cannot be patented. Scientists who have studied these compounds have stated plainly that there is no commercial incentive to develop them because no patent protection is possible. No patent means no exclusive profit. No exclusive profit means no marketing budget. No marketing budget means no public awareness. This is not conspiracy. This is the documented incentive structure of pharmaceutical economics. Companies fund research that supports patentable products. They do not fund research into things that grow in a pot on a patio and come back every spring on their own. A plant that regenerates every year generates 0 recurring revenue. It cannot sustain a subscription model. It cannot support a sales force. It exists entirely outside the economic system that determines what gets researched, what gets funded, what gets marketed, and ultimately what you are allowed to learn about. That is why a compound that killed drug-resistant bacteria in a laboratory dish is still sitting on your spice rack labeled as pizza seasoning instead of being displayed behind the pharmacy counter. 5 plants, 5 antimicrobial systems your ancestors relied on for centuries, all confirmed by modern laboratory science, all growing in a pot by the end of this weekend. Here is the first one, and you almost certainly already have it in your kitchen. Picture a small glass jar on your spice rack, pushed behind the paprika, half empty, forgotten since last month when you sprinkled some on pasta. That jar contains dried leaves from a Mediterranean shrub called oregano. Most people reach for it a few times a month. Toss it on pizza, stir it into tomato sauce, never think about it beyond flavor. But in the mountains of Greece and along the rocky, sun-baked hillsides of southern Turkey, this plant was never just a seasoning. It was a first aid kit. Greek shepherds packed crushed fresh oregano leaves directly into open wounds on the mountainsides above Athens. Turkish villagers in rural Anatolia brewed it into strong bitter tea for respiratory infections and chest ailments. The name itself comes from two Greek words meaning joy of the mountain. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, documented oregano as an antiseptic treatment in ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago. The compound responsible is called carvacrol. In simple terms, it is a molecule that punches holes in bacterial cell walls. When researchers tested essential oils from a wide range of common herbs to see which one was most effective at stopping bacterial growth, oregano came in first, not second, not tied for the lead, first. In laboratory petri dishes, carvacrol has shown strong antibacterial activity against MRSA. That is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, the drug-resistant superbug that hospitals around the world spend millions of dollars fighting every year. The compound disrupts the bacterial membrane and simultaneously interferes with the proteins bacteria need to survive. It attacks from multiple chemical angles at once. That complexity is exactly what makes it so difficult for bacteria to develop resistance. Oregano oil extracts have also demonstrated effectiveness against foodborne pathogens like E. coli and Salmonella in lab models. That half-empty jar of dried oregano on your shelf contains these same compounds. The fresh plant growing in a terracotta pot on a sunlit windowsill contains even more, and this plant is one of the simplest herbs on earth to grow. Oregano thrives in a 6-inch pot on any sunny windowsill. It tolerates drought. It tolerates poor soil. It actually prefers being neglected over being pampered. In warm climates, it is a perennial that returns every spring without replanting. In cold climates, it overwinters happily indoors next to a bright window. Cut it, and it grows back thicker. Dry the leaves, and they retain their compounds for months. Brew them into tea. Infuse them into olive oil. Cook with them daily. The delivery mechanism is the meal you were already going to make. Every Greek grandmother who packed oregano into a wound poultice on a mountainside above the Aegean Sea knew something that laboratory microbiologists confirmed 2,000 years later. The knowledge was never lost around the Mediterranean. It was lost in the countries that decided herbs belonged in the kitchen and nowhere else. Oregano kills bacteria by puncturing their walls, but the next plant does something even modern pharmaceutical antibiotics cannot do. It makes it nearly impossible for bacteria to develop resistance in the first place, and it earned its reputation on the battlefields of 2 world wars. 1858, Paris, France. The most famous microbiologist in human history places garlic juice into a dish of living bacteria inside his laboratory. The bacteria die. Louis Pasteur, the man who proved that germs cause disease, documents the result and moves on to other experiments. He had just performed one of the earliest recorded demonstrations of antibacterial activity in a common food plant. But Pasteur was not the first to notice. Garlic had already been used medicinally for over 3,000 years before he ever touched a clove. The Ebers Papyrus in ancient Egypt prescribed garlic for infections around 1500 BCE. Pliny the Elder in Rome documented it as treatment for dozens of conditions. Every major civilization on Earth independently arrived at the same conclusion: garlic fights infection. The compound responsible is called allicin. It does not exist inside a whole garlic clove sitting quietly on your counter. It is created the instant you crush or chop the clove. That sharp, familiar smell you recognize when you press garlic through a kitchen press is the allicin forming in real time. It is a chemical defense mechanism triggered by tissue damage, a sulfur-containing molecule designed by evolution to protect the plant from bacteria in the soil around its roots. Here is the finding that should have changed the entire conversation about antibiotics. Researchers determined that bacteria develop resistance to allicin approximately 1,000 times more slowly than they develop resistance to standard pharmaceutical antibiotics. 1,000 times. The chemical complexity of allicin makes it nearly impossible for bacteria to evolve a workaround through simple genetic mutation. Allicin showed activity against both major categories of disease-causing bacteria. It disrupts the enzymes bacteria need to function. It prevents biofilm formation, the slimy protective shields bacteria build around themselves to resist antibiotic treatment in chronic infections. And it interferes with quorum sensing, the chemical communication system bacteria use to coordinate their attacks inside your body. There is one catch: allicin is unstable. It breaks down rapidly when exposed to heat. The antimicrobial power exists in raw, freshly crushed garlic. Crush the clove. Wait 10 minutes for the allicin to fully form. Consume it before the compound degrades. Now consider the history that most people have never been taught. During World War I, before mass-produced antibiotics existed, the British government actually appealed for garlic supplies to use as a makeshift antiseptic raw dressing. It works well enough that the practice spread through military hospitals across the entire front. Decades later in World War II, when supplies ran desperately low on the Eastern Front, Soviet medical units relied heavily on garlic preparations to treat wounds, earning it the nickname Russian penicillin. In 1916, during the First World War, the British government issued a public appeal to its own citizens, asking them to supply garlic cloves to help meet wartime medical demand. The most powerful empires on Earth in their most desperate hours turned to a plant bulb that grew in any kitchen garden. Then the wars ended. Pharmaceutical penicillin scaled into mass production in the late 1940s. Garlic went back to the kitchen. The medical establishment moved forward. Research funding chased the patentable molecules. Scientists studying allicin have stated plainly that no company has invested in developing it as a pharmaceutical product because no patent can be filed on a compound that has existed in the public domain for 5,000 years. Garlic grows in any pot at least 8 inches deep. Plant individual cloves in the fall with the pointed end facing up. They sit quietly through winter and produce full bulbs by the following summer. Each harvested bulb contains 6 to 10 new cloves ready for replanting. The crop multiplies itself. The medicine regenerates year after year without anyone purchasing a single thing. Garlic makes it nearly impossible for bacteria to fight back. But the next plant does something even more remarkable. It takes pharmaceutical antibiotics that have already stopped working and forces them to work again. And the compound responsible has been hiding in plain sight inside your mouthwash this entire time. The original formula for Listerine mouthwash was created in 1879. One of its key active ingredients was a compound called thymol. That compound comes directly from a small, woody herb called thyme. For over a century, people around the world have been swishing a thyme-derived chemical around their mouths twice a day, without ever connecting it to the plant growing wild on the hillsides of southern France. Thyme has been used medicinally since ancient Egypt, where it was part of the embalming process used to preserve the dead. Roman soldiers bathed in thyme-infused water before battle, believing it gave them courage and strength. Across rural France, England, and southern Europe, thyme tea was the standard household treatment for chest infections and persistent coughs for centuries, long before modern medicine existed. When researchers tested the antimicrobial properties of essential oils from a wide range of common plants, thyme essential oil demonstrated the strongest antibacterial activity against every bacterial species tested. It was effective against dangerous pathogens, including Staphylococcus aureus, Salmonella, Klebsiella, and Acinetobacter. But the real finding is what happened next. Researchers combined thymol at low concentrations with pharmaceutical antibiotics that had stopped working. In promising laboratory studies, when researchers combined thymol with certain failing antibiotics in petri dishes, they observed a synergistic effect, meaning the plant compound helped breach the bacteria's defenses, allowing the antibiotic to work at a significantly lower concentration. It did not simply add its own killing power. It restored the effectiveness of drugs that bacteria had already learned to survive. The mechanism is elegant. Thymol weakens the outer defenses of resistant bacteria. It disrupts their cell membranes and suppresses the resistance genes that protect them from antibiotic exposure. With those defenses down, the antibiotic that previously bounced off now penetrates and destroys. The plant compound acts as a battering ram that opens the gate for the pharmaceutical drug to walk through. This means researchers are looking at how compounds like thyme might someday be used alongside traditional antibiotics to help rescue their effectiveness in clinical settings. Thyme is one of the easiest herbs to grow in a container. It thrives in poor, dry, sandy soil. It prefers drought over overwatering. It is a perennial that lives for several years in most climates. A single small plant on a sunny patio produces enough fresh sprigs for daily use throughout the growing season. Harvest sprigs whenever you need them with kitchen scissors. Dry them for tea. Infuse them into raw honey. Add them to bone broth. Simmer them in soups. The delivery mechanism is the cup of tea or the bowl of soup you were already planning to make tonight. The pharmaceutical industry sells you the antibiotic in one bottle and the mouthwash containing the same antibacterial compound in another bottle. Both trace their chemistry to the same humble plant. Neither label mentions the herb growing wild on the hillside that started it all. Thyme rescues antibiotics that have stopped working, but the next plant has been fighting infections across an entire continent for over 4,000 years. Walk into any kitchen in India tonight and you will find it already sitting on the counter. Since at least 1900 BCE, nearly 4,000 years ago, Ayurvedic physicians across India prescribed a bright golden root for wound infections, skin diseases, respiratory ailments, digestive problems, and joint inflammation. This is not folk memory fading through oral tradition. This is documented in some of the oldest surviving medical texts on the face of the earth. In India, they call it haldi. It sits in a small container in nearly every kitchen across the subcontinent. Mothers apply fresh turmeric paste to their children's scrapes and cuts before reaching for anything else. In Indian weddings, brides are covered in turmeric paste during the haldi ceremony, a tradition rooted in the ancient understanding that this golden root protects the skin from infection. In Southeast Asia, turmeric treats stomach infections and digestive complaints. In Okinawa, Japan, home to one of the longest-lived populations on the planet, turmeric tea is consumed daily by elders who routinely live past 100. Across the Middle East and South Asia, families have stirred turmeric into warm milk with honey for generations as a remedy for sore throats and chest infections. The active compound that gives turmeric its deep golden color is called curcumin. It attacks bacteria through three simultaneous mechanisms. It disrupts the bacterial cell membrane. It prevents bacteria from forming biofilms, the protective colonies that make chronic infections so difficult to treat with pharmaceutical drugs. And it induces oxidative stress inside the bacterial cell, overwhelming the organism from within. Curcumin showed activity in laboratory tests against Staphylococcus aureus, E. coli, Pseudomonas, and Helicobacter pylori, the bacterium behind most stomach ulcers worldwide. It also showed promise against Mycobacterium tuberculosis. When curcumin was combined with existing tuberculosis drugs, the effectiveness increased beyond what either treatment achieved alone. There is a well-known limitation. Curcumin has low bioavailability when eaten on its own. Your liver breaks it down rapidly before your body can fully use it. But Indian cooks solved this problem centuries ago without knowing any biochemistry. They combined turmeric with black pepper in virtually every dish they made. The piperine in black pepper blocks the liver enzyme that destroys curcumin and dramatically increases absorption. They did not understand the molecular mechanism. They simply observed across generations that it worked better with pepper, and modern researchers confirmed they were exactly right. Turmeric grows beautifully in containers in any warm environment. It thrives indoors near a bright window. Plant the rhizomes in spring in a large pot of rich, moist soil. After 8 to 10 months, dig up the rhizomes and you will find they have multiplied underground. One piece becomes 5 or 6. The medicine manufactures more of itself beneath the soil while you go about your life. Grate it fresh into curries and soups. Brew golden milk with warmed milk, raw honey, freshly cracked black pepper, and grated turmeric root. Dry it and grind it to powder. The delivery system has been perfected by 4,000 years of South Asian home cooking. Over 1 billion people on this planet eat turmeric every single day. They are not waiting for a pharmaceutical company to validate what their grandmothers taught them at the kitchen counter. Turmeric has been fighting infections across Asia for 40 centuries. But the final plant on this list carries the most devastating story of all 5. It was once the single most prescribed plant medicine in the entire United States of America. Then antibiotics arrived. And within 20 years, it was deliberately erased from American medicine. Before antibiotics existed, American doctors prescribed a plant, not something imported from a distant continent, not an exotic remedy from a foreign tradition. A native North American wildflower that grew on the Great Plains from the Dakotas down to Texas. Tall stems crowned with striking purple petals radiating outward from a spiny copper-colored cone. The purple cone flower, Echinacea. Native American nations used this plant for centuries before European settlers ever arrived on the continent. The Lakota used it for pain. The Kiowa used it for coughs and sore throats. The Cheyenne chewed the root for throat infections. The Pawnee used it for headaches. Mothers across dozens of Great Plains tribes packed it into wounds, insect bites, and burns. It was the most widely used medicinal plant among the indigenous nations of the American interior. European settlers took notice. In 1885, a folk doctor named H.C.F. Meyer in Pawnee City, Nebraska began promoting Echinacea preparations to the public. By the early 1900s, a group of physicians called the Eclectics, doctors who practiced both pharmaceutical and botanical medicine, adopted Echinacea as their most important clinical tool. Through the 1920s, Echinacea was the most prescribed plant-derived medicine in the entire United States. It held official status in the U.S. National Formulary from 1916 to 1950. American doctors wrote prescriptions for it. American pharmacies stocked it on their shelves. American patients took it for infections of every kind. Echinacea works differently from the other plants on this list. Rather than directly killing bacteria, it is widely studied for its potential to support the body's natural immune response. It stimulates your body's own defense systems to fight infections more aggressively. Research shows it increases the production of white blood cells, the immune warriors that hunt down and destroy invading bacteria. It strengthens the body's own internal defense cascade from the inside out. This distinction matters enormously. Pharmaceutical antibiotics attack bacteria directly. They do nothing to make your immune system stronger. Echinacea strengthens the host rather than targeting the invader. In an era when bacteria are learning to resist every direct chemical attack we throw at them, boosting the body's own defenses becomes a strategy bacteria cannot develop resistance against. You cannot become resistant to someone else's immune system getting stronger. Then sulfa drugs arrived in the 1930s. Penicillin scaled into mass production in the 1940s. The American medical establishment had its new miracle molecules, and Echinacea, the most widely prescribed plant medicine in the country, was quietly dropped. It was removed from the national formulary by 1950. Within a single generation, American doctors forgot this plant existed. An entire system of botanical medicine that had served American families for over 50 years was replaced by patented synthetic molecules in less than 2 decades. The plant itself never disappeared. It kept growing on the same prairies where the Lakota had harvested it for centuries before any European ever set foot on the continent. Purple cone flowers still bloom across the Great Plains of Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas every July and August. The plant was never extinct, only the memory was. Meanwhile, in Germany, where herbal medicine never left mainstream medical practice, researchers continued studying Echinacea quietly throughout the entire 20th century. Today, Echinacea is sold back to American consumers as a supplement in a brown glass dropper bottle at a significant markup by companies that profit from knowledge American physicians once provided to their patients for free. Echinacea is a native perennial wildflower. It is drought tolerant. It grows from a deep taproot that anchors it through brutal prairie winters. It thrives in poor soil and full sun. It is one of the most important pollinator plants in North American native gardens. Every bee in your neighborhood will find it before you even notice the first bloom. Grow it in a PUT at least 12 inches deep to accommodate the taproot. Harvest flowers and leaves in the second year for tea. Dig roots in the third year for tinctures. Allow it to drop seed, and the patch expands on its own year after year. The most prescribed plant medicine in American history is now a $3 seed packet at the hardware store down the road. Nobody profits when you know that. That is 5 plants. 5 completely different antimicrobial systems covering 5 distinct mechanisms: membrane disruption from oregano, resistance prevention from garlic, antibiotic synergy from thyme, biofilm destruction from turmeric, immune amplification from echinacea. No single pharmaceutical product on any pharmacy shelf anywhere in the world addresses all 5 at the same time. You do not need a farm, you do not need a backyard, you do not need raised beds or a greenhouse. You need 5 pots and a sunny patio or a south-facing windowsill and 1 free afternoon. Oregano in a small clay pot, sunny, dry, happily ignored, thyme right beside it in the same conditions. They are Mediterranean neighbors in the wild, and they will be Mediterranean neighbors on your windowsill. Garlic in a deeper pot, at least 8 inches tall, planted in fall with pointed ends facing the sky. You harvest full bulbs by the following summer. Turmeric in a large pot indoors or in a warm, sheltered corner of your patio. Give it humidity and warmth, and it will multiply underground. Echinacea in the deepest pot you own. Give it room, give it sun. Step back and let it do what prairie wildflowers have been doing for thousands of years without any help from anyone. 5 pots, 5 plants. Total cost for seeds and rhizomes and starter cloves is under $20 one time. That is less than a single copay at most pharmacies in this country. While a kitchen garden is a beautiful, sustainable way to enjoy these fresh herbs and integrate their traditional wellness benefits into your daily cooking, it's important to remember they are a complement to, not a replacement for modern medical care when serious infections strike. Your grandmother probably knew at least one of these plants. In the hills outside Athens, she packed oregano into scrapes that bled. In a kitchen in Seoul or Mumbai, she crushed raw garlic onto cuts that needed cleaning. In a village in Rajasthan, she mixed turmeric paste for every bruise her children brought home from the fields. On the open prairies of Nebraska, she brewed echinacea tea for the sore throats that arrived with every winter. In a stone cottage in the English countryside, she steeped thyme for the cough that would not quit. This knowledge was not destroyed by conspiracy, it was displaced by economics. A plant that grows in a pot generates no recurring revenue. A compound that cannot be patented cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed fades from public consciousness within 3 generations. 3 generations is exactly how long it has been, but the plants did not disappear. Oregano still grows wild across every rocky hillside ringing the Mediterranean Sea. Garlic still multiplies underground in every climate zone on Earth. Thyme still blankets the dry, sunny hills of Provence in southern Turkey. Turmeric still spreads through the warm soil of 1 billion kitchens across India. Echinacea still blooms purple every July across the windswept Great Plains of North America. The plants were never the problem. The forgetting was the problem. And forgetting is entirely reversible. Start with 1 pot this weekend, 1 plant. Watch it grow through a single season, then add a second, then a third. By the time all 5 are established and returning on their own each spring, you will stop seeing a few pots on a patio. You will start seeing a pharmacy that feeds the bees and never needs a refill. The seeds cost almost nothing. The soil asks only that you leave it alone. The plants ask only that you remember them. They have been waiting on mountainsides and in garden centers and across open prairies this entire time. The human gut contains trillions of bacteria. Some keep you alive, others are waiting to kill you, and right now, the balance is shifting in a direction that should terrify every person watching this video. The World Health Organization released data in October 2025 showing that antibiotic resistance rose in over 40% of pathogen antibiotic combinations monitored between 2018 and 2023. The average annual increase sits between 5 and 15%. This is not a distant threat. This is happening inside your body right now. Picture a hospital in any major city. Mumbai, London, Los Angeles, Sao Paulo. Inside those walls, doctors are fighting infections they cannot cure. Escherichia coli, one of the most common causes of bloodstream infections, now shows resistance rates above 40% to third-generation cephalosporins. These are the antibiotics doctors reach for first when someone is dying of sepsis. Klebsiella pneumoniae shows resistance rates above 55%. These numbers come directly from the World Health Organization Global Surveillance Report. They are not projections, they are measurements of what is already happening. The gut is ground zero for this crisis. Your intestines contain bacteria that are frequently exposed to antibiotics. Every course of antibiotics you have ever taken created selective pressure inside your body. The weak bacteria died. The resistant ones survived. They multiplied. They shared their resistance genes with their neighbors. Your gut became a training ground for superbugs. Kevin Ikuda, an infectious disease physician and researcher at UCLA, describes it simply: antimicrobial resistance is just basic evolution. We need antibiotics, but we are in a battle we are trying to lose as slowly as possible anytime we treat an infection. Every antibiotic saves a life today while potentially creating an untreatable infection tomorrow. This is the paradox modern medicine refuses to solve. The bacteria winning this war are not exotic species from distant jungles. They live in your kitchen. Salmonella on your cutting board, E. coli on unwashed vegetables, Campylobacter in undercooked chicken. These everyday pathogens are evolving faster than pharmaceutical companies can develop new drugs. The common infections that antibiotics used to cure in days are becoming deadly again. Carbapenem resistance was once considered rare. Carbapenems are the antibiotics of last resort, the drugs doctors use when nothing else works. Now, carbapenem resistance is becoming more frequent. Treatment options are narrowing. Physicians are running out of weapons, and the pharmaceutical pipeline that should be delivering new antibiotics is nearly empty. Two reports from the World Health Organization in 2025 revealed that global efforts to find treatments for drug-resistant infections are failing. The global antibiotic drug development pipeline faces a dual crisis. There is a scarcity of drugs in development. There's a lack of innovation and methods to fight drug-resistant bacteria. The clock is ticking, and the hands are moving faster than anyone wants to admit. Here is the economic reality no one discusses publicly. Pharmaceutical companies make money from drugs people take for years. Blood pressure medication, cholesterol drugs, diabetes treatments, these generate billions in recurring revenue. Antibiotics are different. People take them for 7 to 14 days and then stop. The profit margins are thin and the development costs are enormous. So drug companies quietly walked away from antibiotic research. They chased more profitable diseases while resistance spread unchecked. The projections are staggering. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria currently account for over 25% of hospital-acquired infections worldwide. By 2050, researchers project 10 million deaths annually from resistant infections. That would make antibiotic resistance deadlier than cancer. This is not science fiction. This is mathematics applied to bacterial evolution. But here's what the pharmaceutical industry, the supplement companies, and the medical establishment have failed to tell you. What if the solution was never going to come from a laboratory? What if there were compounds that selectively target harmful bacteria while leaving beneficial bacteria intact? What if those compounds existed in plants that humans have used for 4,000 years? What if they grew in buckets on a windowsill? The answer involves 3 plants. Each one contains different antimicrobial compounds. Each one attacks bacteria through different mechanisms, and when combined, they create something that bacteria cannot easily evolve resistance against. The science exists, the studies are published, the evidence is hiding in plain sight, so why has no one connected these dots for you? Let us start with the first plant. It grows as a rhizome underground. The flesh inside is bright orange, almost golden. For more than 4,000 years, it has been cultivated as a culinary spice and used in Ayurvedic medicine. It has roots in India, but is now grown in warmer areas around the world. In 1949, scientists named Schraufstadter and colleagues were the first to report its antibacterial properties. That was over 75 years ago. The research has only grown since then. This golden rhizome contains a compound called curcumin. Studies show that curcumin exhibits antibacterial activities against both gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. The antibacterial action involves disrupting bacterial membranes, inhibiting the production of bacterial virulence factors, preventing biofilm formation, and inducing oxidative stress in pathogenic cells. In simple terms, it attacks bad bacteria from multiple angles simultaneously. But here is what makes this plant truly remarkable. It does not kill indiscriminately like synthetic antibiotics. Instead of a kill-all approach, this golden rhizome appears to have a selective effect. It helps inhibit the growth of certain pathogenic bacterial strains while actually encouraging the growth of beneficial strains like bifidobacteria and lactobacilli. This is the opposite of what antibiotics do. Antibiotics are bombs. This plant is a precision weapon. A randomized, controlled clinical trial studied what happened when humans consumed this golden rhizome daily. The placebo group displayed an overall reduction in bacterial species by 15%. The group taking the golden rhizome displayed a modest 7% increase in observed species after treatment, but the group taking the concentrated extract displayed an average increase of 69% in detected bacterial species, 69% more diversity, more beneficial bacteria, a healthier gut ecosystem. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved curcumin as a compound generally recognized as safe. This is not some untested folk remedy. This is a thoroughly studied compound with decades of research behind it. Clinical studies have revealed that culinary spices like this golden rhizome induce beneficial alterations in gut microbial communities. They promote digestive health through increased production of short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate. Butyrate feeds the cells lining your intestines. It reduces inflammation. It strengthens the gut barrier that keeps pathogens from entering your bloodstream. Now let us examine the second plant. It belongs to the same family as the golden rhizome. It also grows underground as a rhizome. The flesh is pale yellow with a fibrous texture. The smell is sharp and unmistakable. Humans have used it for cooking and medicine across Asia for thousands of years. You probably have some in your kitchen right now, but you have never considered it medicine. This burning root contains compounds called gingerols, shogalls, and zingarone. Laboratory studies have shown something remarkable. Extracts from this root showed more antimicrobial activity against 5 test organisms compared to synthetic antibiotics. Let that sink in. A plant root outperformed pharmaceutical antibiotics in laboratory conditions. The antimicrobial effect comes from phytochemicals including camphene, phelandrine, and zingiberine. Researchers specifically tested this burning root against bacteria isolated from patients with digestive tract infections. The results showed clear antibacterial activity and suggested it can be used as a medicine to treat these infections. This is not theoretical. This is observed science. The same E. coli and salmonella that are developing resistance to pharmaceutical antibiotics showed vulnerability to compounds in this ancient root. The third plant comes from a completely different family. It grows above ground with small leaves and purple flowers. It thrives in the rocky, sun-baked soil of the Mediterranean. Greek physicians documented its medicinal uses over 2,000 years ago. Roman soldiers carried it across their empire. Today it grows wild on hillsides from Spain to Turkey. You probably know it as a pizza topping. You have never considered it a weapon against pathogenic bacteria. This Mediterranean herb contains 2 phenolic compounds called carvacrol and thymol. These compounds have a hydroxyl group that literally destroys bacterial cell membranes. They cause leakage of ions and molecules from inside the bacterial cell. The bacteria essentially bleed to death at a microscopic level. Research indicates that carvacrol works by disrupting the cell membranes of bacteria, causing them to leak essential minerals and eventually leading to cell death. Scientists have observed this action against bacteria including E. coli, Salmonella, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Staphylococcus aureus. These are not obscure laboratory strains. These are the bacteria causing real infections in real people right now. The same pathogens that are evolving resistance to pharmaceutical antibiotics are vulnerable to compounds in this common herb. But the most important finding is this: research suggests that this Mediterranean herb is more discerning than synthetic antibiotics. Some studies have shown that carvacrol may be less harmful to certain strains of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium compared to how it treats pathogens like E. coli or staphylococcus. The good bacteria survive, the bad bacteria die. This is selective antimicrobial activity. This is what modern medicine has been trying and failing to achieve for decades. A small human study examined patients with fatigue and chronic gastrointestinal symptoms who tested positive for fecal parasites. They took oil from this Mediterranean herb daily for 6 weeks. 93% of patients were able to eliminate their parasites. 13 out of 14 people were cured by an herb that costs pennies per dose. Now here is where the science becomes truly exciting. Each of these 3 plants works through different mechanisms. The golden rhizome disrupts bacterial membranes and inhibits virulence factors. The burning root attacks through different phytochemical pathways. The Mediterranean herb punctures cell walls with phenolic compounds. When you combine different mechanisms, bacteria cannot easily evolve resistance. Evolving resistance to one attack still leaves them vulnerable to the other 2. Researchers have begun studying what happens when you combine these plants. A study published in Frontiers in Pharmacology examined the combined anti-inflammatory activity of the golden rhizome and the burning root. By comparing the activities of individual and combined extracts, they demonstrated that the combination was optimal at a specific ratio of 5:2 by weight. The combination showed synergistic interaction. This means the combination was more powerful than the sum of its parts. The combined extract synergistically attenuated a range of pro-inflammatory mediators. It significantly inhibited pathways that drive inflammation and infection. The suppressive effect of the combination on each protein target was stronger than that of the individual components. This is not additive. This is multiplicative. 1 + 1 equals more than 2 when these plants combine. A mixture of the golden rhizome and burning root powder tested in a rat model of human rheumatoid arthritis exerted greater effects in reducing systemic inflammation compared to indomethacin, a pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory drug. A plant combination outperformed a pharmaceutical. This study was published in peer-reviewed scientific literature. It is not hidden. It is simply ignored. Synergy plays a prominent role in herbal medicines to increase potency and widen therapeutic windows. The mechanism of synergy is often associated with multi-targeted behavior and complex signaling pathways. Traditional healers across Asia understood this intuitively. They always combined these plants. They never used them in isolation. Modern science is only now catching up to ancient wisdom. There is one more piece to this puzzle. The golden rhizome has a bioavailability problem. Curcumin on its own is poorly absorbed by the human body. Most of it passes through your digestive system without entering your bloodstream. This is why many studies used high-dose extracts rather than whole food. But traditional cultures solved this problem centuries ago. A compound found in black pepper called piperine can increase the absorption of curcumin by up to 2,000%. That is 20 times more absorption simply by adding black pepper. Since curcumin is fat-soluble, consuming it with a meal that contains healthy fats helps it move through the digestive system more effectively. Examples include avocado, olive oil, and coconut milk. These all enhance absorption. Recent research has also shown the importance of the food matrix in curcumin absorption. Studies highlight enhanced bioavailability when curcumin is consumed as fresh or powdered whole root compared to supplements. This could be due to synergistic activity with other compounds in the whole plant, or to a matrix effect. In other words, the whole food may work better than the isolated extract. The supplement industry does not want you to know this. We are talking about 3 plants, each validated by modern science. Each has been used by billions of people across Asia and the Mediterranean for millennia. Each one selectively targets pathogenic bacteria while preserving beneficial gut flora. Each grows easily in simple containers. Each costs almost nothing after the initial planting. Why are they not in every medicine cabinet in the Western world? The answer is not conspiracy. The answer is economics. You cannot patent a plant. You cannot patent a rhizome that has grown in India for 4,000 years. You cannot patent an herb that Greek physicians documented in ancient texts. Without a patent, there is no monopoly. Without a monopoly, there is no guaranteed profit. Without guaranteed profit, there is no investment. A self-seeding herb cannot generate repeat seed sales. A spice that costs $3 per pound cannot generate $50 per bottle supplement margins. A plant that grows in a bucket cannot generate quarterly earnings growth. The pharmaceutical industry did not suppress these plants. The industry simply followed its incentive structures. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that makes their products unnecessary. Search the medical research database PubMed, type fish oil omega-3, and you will find over 15,000 studies. Type the name of the golden rhizome, and you will find far fewer studies relative to its potential importance. The ratio reveals the funding bias. Fish oil has industry backing, plant medicine does not. Universities pursue grants from available sources. The available sources favor patentable interventions. A plant that anyone can grow cannot generate licensing revenue. A compound that exists in nature cannot be exclusively owned. The funding flows elsewhere. The research follows the funding. The knowledge gaps persist not through malice but through market dynamics. Even the natural health industry has perverse incentives. A supplement company selling capsules of the golden rhizome needs you to buy those capsules monthly. They do not want you growing the plant in buckets on your porch. An extract company needs you to believe that whole food sources are inferior to their concentrated products. They will not advertise that bioavailability may actually be enhanced when consumed as fresh or powdered whole root rather than supplements. The knowledge is fragmented by design. Research on the golden rhizome exists in one database. Research on the burning root sits in another. Studies on the Mediterranean herb scatter across different journals. No one connects the dots because no one profits from connecting dots. The synergy research is recent precisely because no funding existed until researchers started investigating traditional combinations. Although the individual anti-inflammatory activity of the burning root and the golden rhizome has been investigated, the plausible synergistic activity of combined extracts has not been systematically studied until recently. These plants are often used in combination as popular nutraceuticals. However, there was a lack of scientific evidence to support their combined use, while synergy was often stated as rational. The absence of research was not because the combinations did not work. The absence was because no one was paying for the studies. The regulatory structure creates additional barriers. Plants cannot be approved as drugs in most Western countries. They can only be sold as food or supplements. This means no company can legally claim that the golden rhizome treats gut dysbiosis even if evidence supports it. The regulatory architecture was built for synthetic molecules created in laboratories. It has no pathway for validating traditional plant medicines. Billions of people across Asia use these plants weekly. Indian grandmothers add the golden rhizome to every meal. The burning root appears in soups and teas and stir-fries across China, Japan, and Korea. Mediterranean families season their food with the warrior herb daily. The knowledge is not hidden. It is simply not packaged for Western consumption. The question was never why Asia hid these plants. Asia hid nothing. The question is why Western systems failed to notice. Why did medical schools never teach this? Why did nutrition guidelines never include this? Why did public health campaigns never mention this? The answer is always the same. No patent, no profit, no promotion, but you know now, and knowing changes everything. Because here is what no corporation, no pharmaceutical company, no supplement manufacturer can prevent. You can grow these plants yourself. You can become your own pharmacy. You can step outside the system that profits from your dependence. The golden rhizome grows remarkably well in containers. This makes it perfect for anyone in any climate. Researchers at the University of Vermont Extension wrote that it is easy to grow indoors, although the plants do benefit from time outside during warm weather months. Optimum growing temperatures are 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Low temperatures lead to dormancy, not death. The plant simply waits for warmth to return. Start with organic rhizomes from a grocery store. Look for pieces with visible bumps or eyes. These are the growth points. Soak them overnight in warm water. Plant them 2 inches deep in a large container, at least 5 gallons. Use rich, well-draining soil. Place the container in a warm location with indirect light. Patience is required. It will take 3 to 8 weeks for sprouts to appear. The golden rhizome sprouts later than its cousin, the burning root. For the most part, these plants are relatively carefree. The golden rhizome will grow 3 to 4 feet in height. Water when the top inch of soil feels dry. Mist the leaves occasionally to provide humidity. Harvest after 8 to 10 months when the leaves begin to yellow and die back. Carefully dig up the rhizomes. Save some pieces for replanting. The rest is your medicine. Fresh rhizomes can be grated into food immediately. They can be dried and powdered for long-term storage. One harvest provides enough material for months of daily use. The burning root follows the same process because they are botanical cousins. They even grow well together in the same large container. The burning root sprouts faster, usually within 2 to 4 weeks. Since both plants are tropical, they both like high humidity, high temperatures, and plenty of bright shade. The burning root can become about 3 feet tall. Growing these rhizomes in large containers is genius on multiple levels. You will do less weeding. The plants will be easier to hill, which means mounding soil around the stems as they grow. If the color of your container is dark, like black plastic, it will absorb more heat and stimulate your rhizomes to grow more quickly. Container growing also allows you to move the plants indoors when temperatures drop. The Mediterranean warrior herb is the easiest of the 3. It does well in containers, making it the perfect herb for those who live in apartments or have small outdoor spaces. Buy a small plant from any nursery for a few dollars. Transplant it into a container with well-draining soil. Place it in full sun. Water sparingly. This herb actually prefers dry conditions. Overwatering is the most common mistake. The Mediterranean herb is a perennial. It will last for years in your garden. It is what gardeners call a woody herb, because the longer it grows, the more woody its stems become. It is hardy down to zone 4, which means it will survive the winter in most climates. Plant once, harvest for years. No replanting, no repurchasing, permanent access to antimicrobial compounds. The herb grows well indoors in containers provided it gets at least 5 to 6 hours of sunlight per day. If you lack sufficient natural light, supplemental grow lights work perfectly. One plant produces more leaves than a single household can use. The excess can be dried and stored for years without losing potency. Now you have 3 plants growing in buckets. The golden rhizome in a large, dark container. The burning root beside it or sharing the same pot. The Mediterranean herb in a smaller container on a sunny windowsill. 3 plants, 3 different mechanisms of antimicrobial action. 3 sources of compounds that selectively target pathogenic bacteria while promoting beneficial gut flora. Creating the combination is simple. Great fresh golden rhizome and fresh burning root in a ratio of 2 parts golden rhizome to 5 parts burning root by weight. This is the ratio shown to produce synergistic effects in published research. Add fresh or dried leaves from the Mediterranean herb. Season with black pepper to enhance curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. Consume with fat such as olive oil, coconut oil, or whole milk to further improve bioavailability. This is not supplementation. This is not medicine in the pharmaceutical sense. This is food. This is how billions of people have eaten for thousands of years. Daily incorporation into cooking, a golden paste added to rice, grated root in morning tea, herb leaves scattered over roasted vegetables. The compounds enter your system slowly, consistently, day after day. The synergy does not require precise measurements. Traditional cultures never weighed their spices on laboratory scales. They added what tasted right. They combined what their grandmothers combined. The therapeutic window is wide. The margin for error is generous. You cannot overdose on culinary quantities of these plants. Long-term consistency matters more than perfect dosing. A small amount every day for years beats a large amount once in a while. The goal is not to treat acute infection. The goal is to create an internal environment where pathogenic bacteria struggle to establish themselves while beneficial bacteria thrive. Prevention through daily practice rather than intervention after crisis. The antibiotic resistance crisis is real. The projections of 39 million deaths between now and 2050 are based on current trends. The pharmaceutical pipeline is failing. The drugs we depend on are losing effectiveness faster than replacements can be developed. This is the backdrop against which your health decisions unfold. But the solutions exist. They grow in soil across the world. They have been validated by modern science even as they remain ignored by modern medicine. They are suppressed by economics rather than conspiracy, by market incentives rather than malicious intent. The result is the same. Knowledge that could transform public health sits buried in research databases while antibiotic resistance accelerates. The pharmaceutical industry cannot patent a plant that has grown for 4,000 years. The supplement industry cannot prevent you from growing your own. The only thing standing between this knowledge and your kitchen is whether you decide to act. The rhizomes are available at any grocery store. The herb plants wait at any nursery. The containers cost a few dollars. The soil is everywhere. Picture your kitchen 6 months from now. A dark container by the window holds green shoots emerging from golden rhizomes below the soil. Beside it, the fibrous roots of ginger spread through rich earth. On the sunniest windowsill, woody stems of oregano reach toward the light, covered in small aromatic leaves. Your personal pharmacy. Your independence from systems that profit from your dependence. Your answer to a crisis that institutions have failed to solve. This is what resilience looks like. Not bunkers and freeze-dried meals. Not supplements shipped from factories across oceans. Not prescriptions that require permission from gatekeepers. Resilience is a plant that grows while you sleep, a rhizome that multiplies underground, an herb that returns year after year without replanting, food that is also medicine, medicine that is also food. The ancient physicians of India knew this, the traditional healers of China knew this, the Greek doctors who documented Mediterranean herbs knew this. For thousands of years, humans understood that the line between food and medicine was artificial. Only modern Western culture drew a hard boundary between what we eat and what heals us. That boundary served industries. It did not serve health. You have watched this video to the end. You now possess knowledge that most people will never encounter. Knowledge about 3 plants that selectively kill pathogenic bacteria, knowledge about synergistic combinations that enhance their effects, knowledge about bioavailability solutions discovered centuries ago, knowledge about why this information remained obscure despite decades of published research. The question is no longer whether these plants work. The studies are published. The mechanisms are understood. The clinical evidence exists. The question is whether you will act on what you now know, whether you will plant a rhizome in a bucket, whether you will add an herb to your windowsill, whether you will reclaim autonomy over your own gut health. The bacteria in your intestines are waiting. The pathogenic strains are evolving resistance. The beneficial strains need support. The balance is shifting. Which direction it shifts next depends partly on forces beyond your control and partly on choices you make every day, what you eat, what you grow, what you understand about the ancient relationship between plants and human health. The seeds are waiting. The research is clear. The only question remaining is this: will you grow it? Walk into any pharmacy in North America tonight. Find the Digestive Health aisle. Pick up the first bottle you see, turn it around, read the ingredients: slippery elm bark, marshmallow root extract, ginger powder, peppermint oil, turmeric concentrate, dandelion root. These are not synthetic chemicals engineered in a laboratory. These are plants, dried plants, ground up plants, plants that someone harvested from a field, dehydrated in a factory, packed into a capsule, sealed in a bottle, shipped across an ocean, marked up 800 to 2,000% and placed on a shelf next to a price tag that assumes you will never learn what you are about to learn. The global digestive health crisis is real. Over 40 million Americans deal with chronic constipation. Irritable bowel syndrome affects 1 in 7 people on Earth. Acid reflux prescriptions have tripled in the last 20 years. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are increasing in every industrialized country, especially among younger populations. The gut lining of the average Western adult is more inflamed, more permeable, and more microbially depleted than at any point in recorded medical history. People feel it. The bloating after meals, the cramping that comes and goes without pattern, the fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to fix. The doctors say reduce stress. The supplement companies say take this capsule. Nobody says walk outside and look at what is growing. But that is exactly what we are going to do. 20 plants. Every one of them grows in a container on a balcony. Every one of them targets a specific mechanism inside the digestive tract. Some coat the gut lining like a biological bandage. Some reduce the inflammation that causes the damage in the first place. Some feed the beneficial bacteria that your gut depends on to function. Some stimulate the bile that breaks down the food you eat. And some calm the spasms and the nervous tension that make every other symptom worse. Together they form a complete system. Not a single magic cure, a system. And the first one, the one that coats your entire digestive tract like a protective shield, has been used for over 400 years by people who never needed a gastroenterologist. Slippery elm. The inner bark of this tree does something no pharmaceutical has ever been able to replicate cleanly. When it contacts water, it produces mucilage, a thick slippery gel that coats the stomach walls and the intestinal lining on contact. Picture pouring honey over a raw wound. The gel forms a physical barrier between your damaged tissue and the acid and food passing through. It does not suppress acid production the way antacids do. It does not numb the tissue the way bismuth does. It protects it. Native American nations across the Great Lakes region and the Appalachian Mountains used slippery elm bark as a primary stomach medicine for centuries before European contact. Families would strip the inner bark, dry it, and brew it into a thick drink for anyone with digestive complaints. It was one of the most widely traded medicinal barks on the continent. European settlers learned about it. They used it too. And then the supplement industry turned it into a $15 bottle of capsules, and the original knowledge disappeared from public memory. Slippery elm is a large forest tree that cannot be practically grown or sustained long-term on a balcony to harvest bark. For balcony growing, stick to small potted herbs like peppermint or chamomile. But slippery elm is not the strongest coater on this list. That distinction belongs to marshmallow root, not the candy, the plant. And understanding the difference tells you everything you need to know about how traditional medicine became a product. Marshmallow root contains up to 35% mucilage by dry weight. That is the highest concentration of gut-coating compounds in any commonly available plant on Earth. When you take the dried root and soak it in cold water overnight, the water becomes thick and viscous, almost syrupy. That liquid coats your entire digestive tract, from your esophagus to your colon. Hospital trials in Europe have shown it reduces symptoms of acid reflux and gastritis. Ancient Egyptians figured this out over 3,000 years ago. They combined marshmallow root with honey and used it to soothe sore throats and stomach pain. The preparation was so effective and so pleasant that confectioners eventually started making a sweet version. They whipped the root extract with sugar and egg whites. That was the original marshmallow, the candy, named after the plant it came from. Over time, the candy industry removed the root entirely and replaced it with gelatin and corn syrup. They kept the name, they dropped the medicine. Today you can buy a bag of marshmallows for $2. The plant they were named after costs $18 in capsule form at the supplement store. The actual living plant costs $3 as a starter from a nursery, and it comes back every year. Pink flowers, tolerates neglect, one of the easiest medicinal plants to grow on a balcony. The third coater is one you probably already have in your home, Aloe vera. Most people associate aloe with sunburn. You snap a leaf and rub the gel on your skin. Millions of households have one sitting on a kitchen windowsill right now collecting dust between sunburns, doing nothing. But traditional Ayurvedic practitioners in India have been using aloe internally for over 5,000 years. The inner gel contains a compound called asamanin that soothes inflamed intestinal tissue and supports the mucosal lining that protects the gut wall. Clinical research has shown aloe vera juice reduces symptoms in patients with irritable bowel syndrome and ulcerative colitis. In rural villages across Rajasthan and Kerala, families still grow aloe outside their doors and cut fresh leaves when someone has stomach trouble. The plant grows on any sunny windowsill or balcony. It requires almost no water. One mature aloe produces enough gel for daily use indefinitely, and it propagates by producing pups, small baby plants that grow at the base of the mother. You separate them, you pot them, you now have 2 pharmacies instead of 1. The fourth plant in this group is the one that will make you angry when you realize what it is. It grows in sidewalk cracks. It grows in gravel driveways. It grows in compacted soil where nothing else survives. Gardeners across the entire temperate world have pulled it from their lawns and thrown it away without a second thought. It is called plantain, not the banana, the weed, Plantago major, the broadleaf plant with ribbed leaves that appears in every neglected yard from Toronto to Tokyo. Anglo-Saxon texts from over 1,000 years ago listed among the 9 sacred healing herbs. European folk medicine called it the mother of herbs. The leaves contain 3 compounds that work together on the gut. Aucubin reduces inflammation. Allantoin accelerates tissue repair, and mucilage coats the irritated surfaces, a triple function from a single leaf that most people treat as garbage. You have probably walked past it 100 times this month alone. It grows in the poorest soil imaginable. Put it in a pot on your balcony and it will colonize every inch you give it. It self-seeds so aggressively that your only job is to stop throwing it away. Those 4 plants coat your gut like armor, but coating alone does not fix the damage that caused the problem. The next group goes after the inflammation itself, and the first one in this group has been the single most studied anti-inflammatory plant compound of the last 50 years. Turmeric, the bright orange rhizome that has stained the kitchens of India and Southeast Asia for 3,000 years. The active compound is curcumin. While some small studies suggest it may help reduce inflammation, clinical trials show it has low bioavailability on its own, and it should only ever be used as a complementary support, never a replacement for prescribed medical treatments for Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. In India, families consume turmeric every single day, not as a supplement, but as a spice. Golden milk, curries, rice dishes, dal, turmeric is in everything. And the population-level gut health data from regions with high daily turmeric consumption tells a story that the supplement industry would prefer you not notice. You can grow turmeric in a pot on a balcony that gets warmth and sun. Plant a piece of rhizome in spring and harvest in fall. The same pot produces year after year. The rhizome you pull from the soil is fresher and more potent than anything in a bottle. Ginger grows the same way, same family, same method. Buy a piece of organic ginger root from the grocery store, cut it into sections with visible buds, plant them 2 inches deep in a wide pot. In 4 months, you have your own supply. Ginger contains gingerols and shogols. These compounds speed up the movement of food through the stomach. They reduce nausea. They calm intestinal spasms. Ginger is one of the few herbal remedies validated for nausea in clinical settings, including post-surgical nausea and morning sickness during pregnancy. Walk through any traditional Chinese medicine shop in San Francisco or Vancouver or Singapore. You will see dried ginger and fresh ginger stored in separate bins. Chinese practitioners treat them as 2 completely different medicines with different properties. Dried ginger warms the interior. Fresh ginger moves stagnation. They match the preparation to the condition. Western supplement companies grind it all together and put it in 1 capsule. That distinction, the one between precision and convenience, tells you why traditional medicine worked for thousands of years and why the modern supplement version so often disappoints. Meadowsweet is the one almost nobody knows about, and that is precisely why it matters. This European wildflower contains salicylates, the same family of compounds that aspirin was derived from. In fact, the word aspirin comes directly from meadowsweet. The old botanical name for the plant was Spirea. In 1897, a German chemist synthesized the compound, and the Bayer Pharmaceutical Company named the product after the plant that contained it. The drug went on to become the most consumed medicine in human history. The plant that inspired it was forgotten. But here is what makes meadowsweet different from the drug it inspired. Synthetic aspirin irritates the stomach lining. That is its most common side effect. Meadowsweet does the opposite. The salicylates in the whole plant come packaged alongside tannins and mucilage compounds that protect the stomach wall while reducing inflammation. Medieval herbalists across England and Central Europe used meadowsweet specifically for stomach ulcers and acid indigestion. It reduces inflammation without causing the gastric damage that its synthetic offspring creates. The plant grows in a pot with consistent moisture. It produces clusters of creamy white flowers, and it prefers partial shade, perfect for a balcony that does not get full sun. Chamomile needs almost no introduction, but it deserves a reintroduction. Most people think of chamomile as a bedtime tea, something gentle, something mild, something your aunt drinks. But chamomile contains apigenin and bisabolol. These are not mild compounds. They relax the smooth muscle of the intestinal walls, they reduce spasms, they calm inflammation. German researchers have studied chamomile so extensively that it holds official medical monograph status in Germany as an approved treatment for gastrointestinal complaints. In many European countries, doctors prescribe chamomile tea before reaching for pharmaceutical antispasmodics. Walk through any German pharmacy. You will find chamomile preparations in the medicine section, not the tea section, the medicine section. One plant in a small pot produces dozens of flowers through the growing season. It self-seeds. It costs nothing to maintain. A single balcony pot provides enough chamomile for daily tea from spring through fall. Calendula is the bright orange flower you have seen in 1,000 gardens without knowing what it does inside the body. The petals contain compounds called triterpenoids and flavonoids that promote healing of damaged mucosal tissue throughout the gut. Calendula has been used internally for gastritis, stomach ulcers, and inflamed intestinal lining. It also carries mild antimicrobial properties that help rebalance the bacterial environment in the gut. The common name is pot marigold. The word pot does not refer to a flower pot. It refers to a cooking pot. European farming families grew calendula in kitchen gardens for centuries and tossed the petals into soups and stews. The plant was food and medicine at the same time. Calendula blooms constantly in a pot. Bright orange flowers all season long, tolerates poor soil, deadhead spent flowers, and it keeps producing until frost. 9 plants in, and you already have a gut coating system and a natural anti-inflammatory arsenal sitting on your balcony. But here's where it gets more interesting. The next group targets something most supplements completely ignore: the actual bacterial environment inside your intestines. And the first plant in this group is one that most Americans spend money trying to kill, while the French spend money trying to eat. Dandelion. Every spring across North America, millions of homeowners spray herbicide on dandelions. They poison them. They dig them out. They curse them. Lawn care companies charge $40 to $60 per treatment to eradicate them. In France, those same plants are called pissenlit. French families eat the young leaves in salads dressed with olive oil and mustard vinaigrette. They roast the roots and brew them into a coffee substitute. Market vendors in Paris and Lyon sell bundles of fresh dandelion greens at spring farmers markets. They consider it a seasonal delicacy. The root is rich in inulin, a prebiotic fiber that selectively feeds the bifidobacteria and lactobacillus species that your gut depends on. These are the same bacterial strains that probiotic supplement companies charge $30 to $50 a bottle to deliver. Dandelion root feeds the ones you already have, for free. It also stimulates bile production, which improves how your body digests fats. The entire plant is usable. Roots for prebiotic fiber and bile support, leaves for vitamins and minerals, flowers for antioxidants. It grows anywhere, in anything with no help. It is the most indestructible plant on this entire list. Put it in a pot, and it will thank you by never dying. Burdock root takes the prebiotic function even further. In Japan, they call it gobo. Walk into any grocery store in Tokyo or Osaka, and you will find burdock root stacked alongside carrots and onions. It is a daily vegetable, sliced thin, sautéed, added to soups and stir-fries. Hundreds of millions of people in East Asia eat it as food, not medicine. The root contains inulin in even higher concentrations than dandelion, up to 50% of the dry root weight. Japanese researchers have documented its measurable effects on gut microbiome composition. In the West, it is either completely unknown or sold in capsule form at a markup that would make a Tokyo grocer laugh. Burdock grows in a deep pot because the taproot needs room. First year you get leaves, second year you harvest the root. It requires patience. But the result is a prebiotic powerhouse that the Japanese have been eating every day for longer than most Western countries have existed. Globe artichoke is the next one, and most people only know half of it. You eat the heart at dinner, you dip the leaves in butter, but the real gut healing power is in the large outer leaves that restaurants throw away. Artichoke leaves contain cynurin and chlorogenic acid. These compounds stimulate bile flow from the liver and protect the cells that produce it. Increased bile production directly improves how you digest fats and reduces the bloating and gas and discomfort that follow a heavy meal. European clinical trials have shown artichoke leaf extract reduces irritable bowel syndrome symptoms by up to 40%. Ancient Romans and Greeks considered the artichoke a digestive luxury. In modern Italy, families still drink carciofo, a bitter artichoke liqueur, after a large meal, not for pleasure, for function. The plant grows beautifully in a large pot on a balcony, dramatic silvery green leaves, architectural form. Even if you never harvest the flower bud, the leaves alone provide the medicinal value. Fenugreek is one of the oldest cultivated plants in human history. Archaeologists found fenugreek seeds in the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt. The seeds contain galactomannan, a soluble fiber that forms a gel inside the digestive tract, similar to mucilage but with an additional prebiotic function. It slows sugar absorption and it feeds beneficial bacteria. It has also been shown to reduce acid reflux symptoms. In India, fenugreek is called methi. Indian mothers give methi to new mothers after birth to support digestion and milk production. This is not alternative medicine. This is a tradition spanning thousands of years across a country of 1.4 billion people. Fenugreek grows fast from seed in any pot. The leaves are edible as greens. The seeds are harvested and dried. It is an easy annual that goes from planting to harvest in a single season. Fennel. Walk into any Indian restaurant anywhere in the world. Look at the counter near the register. There is a small bowl filled with colorful seeds. Most Western diners assume it is candy or decoration. It is neither. Those are fennel seeds coated in sugar. Fennel contains anethole, a compound that relaxes the smooth muscle of the intestinal walls and reduces bloating and gas. Indian families have chewed fennel seeds after meals for longer than anyone can trace. Mediterranean civilizations did the same. In pediatric medicine, fennel tea is one of the very few herbal remedies considered gentle enough for infant colic. That tells you something about its safety profile. A remedy trusted for newborns works just as well for adults. Fennel grows tall in a deep pot. Every part is usable. The bulb, the fronds, the seeds, let it flower and it self-seeds for next year. 14 plants. Your balcony now has a coating system, an anti-inflammatory arsenal, and a bacterial feeding program. But your gut also has a nervous system. It is sometimes called the second brain. Over 500 million nerve cells line the digestive tract. When those nerves are agitated, when stress or anxiety or tension puts them into overdrive, the gut goes into spasm. Nothing else works properly when that happens. The next group calms the nervous system down. And one of these plants is so effective at it that hospitals across Europe have used it for acute digestive crises. Peppermint. The menthol in peppermint leaves directly relaxes the smooth muscle of the gastrointestinal tract. This is not folklore. This is one of the most clinically validated herbal effects in modern medicine. Enteric-coated peppermint oil capsules are recommended by gastroenterologists for irritable bowel syndrome. They reduce abdominal pain, they reduce bloating, they reduce the urgency that disrupts daily life. But those capsules are just concentrated peppermint. The fresh leaf contains the same compound. You could walk out to your balcony, pick 6 leaves, pour hot water over them, and in 5 minutes have a remedy that gastroenterologists charge a consultation fee to recommend. Ancient Egyptian medical texts reference mint for stomach complaints. Every traditional medicine system that had access to mint used it for the gut. Peppermint grows aggressively in a pot on any balcony, almost too aggressively. It spreads. It fills every inch of soil. It sends runners over the edge of the pot looking for new territory. It does not ask permission. One pot provides unlimited fresh peppermint for tea and cooking and direct gut relief throughout the entire growing season and into fall if the weather cooperates. Lemon balm is peppermint's quieter relative, and it targets a problem that peppermint does not. Stress-driven digestion, the kind of stomach pain that arrives when your mind will not stop racing, the nausea that shows up before a difficult conversation, the cramping that follows a bad night of sleep. Lemon balm contains rosmarinic acid, which calms the nervous system, and by extension calms the gut that the nervous system controls. Medieval monks grew it in monastery gardens across Europe for exactly this purpose. It grows like a weed in any pot. It has lemon-scented leaves. It makes an exceptional calming tea. It comes back stronger every year without replanting. Caraway seeds are hidden in plain sight across Central and Northern European cooking. Every loaf of traditional rye bread, every proper batch of sauerkraut, every Hungarian goulash. The seeds contain carvone and limonene. These are compounds that relieve bloating, reduce intestinal gas, and promote healthy digestive motility. German researchers studied caraway in combination with peppermint oil and found the combination more effective than pharmaceutical antispasmodics for functional dyspepsia. That finding should have changed everything. It did not. The pharmaceutical version still outsells the plants. It cannot outperform. Pre-modern European cooks already knew this. They put caraway in heavy dishes not because of the flavor, because the seeds prevented the bloating that heavy food causes. The knowledge was in the recipe all along. Caraway grows easily in a pot. It is a biennial, producing seeds in its second year. It is cold hardy and completely low maintenance. Dill is another one hiding in the recipe book. The next time you see a jar of pickles, look at the sprig floating in the brine. That is not there for aesthetics. Dill contains monoterpenes that relax intestinal smooth muscle and reduce gas. Dill water, also called gripe water, has been given to babies with colic for centuries across Europe and the Middle East. It is gentle enough for a newborn. It is effective enough that the tradition survived 1,000 years of medical advancement without anyone replacing it. The herb appears in Egyptian tombs. It is referenced in the Bible. Persian and Scandinavian and Eastern European and Middle Eastern cuisines all depend on it. Every one of those cultures understood its digestive role. Dill grows fast from seed in any pot. Feathery green foliage, let it flower, and it self-seeds for the following year. Licorice root is the 19th plant, and it does something specific that sets it apart. It stimulates mucus production in the stomach lining. Not mucilage from outside like marshmallow root, but mucus from inside your own protective layer, thickened and reinforced by a plant compound called glycyrrhizin. A modified form called DGL is sometimes used to help soothe the stomach, but it cannot legally or safely be claimed to perform at the same level as pharmaceutical acid blockers for treating medical stomach ulcers. In traditional Chinese medicine, licorice root appears in more classical formulas than any other single plant. Chinese herbalists call it the Great Harmonizer because it balances and supports every other herb it is combined with. It has been prescribed for digestive conditions across China, India, and the Middle East for at least 4,000 years. 3 continents, 4 millennia, 1 root. It grows in a deep pot. It takes patience because the root is harvested in the 3rd year, but the plant is perennial. Once established, it becomes a permanent fixture on your balcony, a slow investment that pays forever. 19 plants, 1 balcony, a coating system, an anti-inflammatory arsenal, a prebiotic feeding program, a bile stimulator, a spasm-calming pharmacy. But there is one more, and this last plant does something none of the others do. It works on both ends of the gut-brain connection simultaneously. St. John's wort. Most people know it for mood support. That reputation is deserved, but it is incomplete. The compounds in this plant, hypericin and hyperforin, have anti-inflammatory effects on the intestinal lining itself, but they also calm the central nervous system that sends stress signals down to the gut. When the brain is calmer, the gut heals faster. This is not poetic language. This is the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional communication highway between your intestines and your head that modern gastroenterology has spent the last 2 decades trying to understand. European herbalists figured it out over 2,000 years ago with nothing but observation and patience. Hippocrates documented it. Paracelsus prescribed it. The plant is named for the feast of St. John on the 24th of June, when it traditionally blooms across European meadows. Bright yellow flowers on a hardy stem that tolerates poor soil, drought, and neglect. It thrives in a pot on a balcony. It represents the final piece of the puzzle, the connection between your gut and your mind addressed by a single plant that has been waiting in the fields for centuries while the pharmaceutical industry sold you the 2 halves separately. Now step back and look at what just happened. 20 plants, 5 complete functions, coating the gut lining, reducing inflammation, feeding beneficial bacteria and stimulating bile, calming spasms and relaxing the enteric nervous system, and bridging the gap between gut and brain. Together, these 20 plants address every major mechanism that the digestive health industry targets with its $68 billion in annual supplement sales. A single balcony, even a small one, can hold all 20 in containers. Some share pots, some stack vertically on shelves, some hang from railings, the peppermint in a hanging basket, the aloe on the sunny corner, the turmeric and ginger in deep pots against the warm wall, the chamomile and calendula flowering together in a long trough, the dandelion growing in whatever container you forgot about. The physical footprint is smaller than the shelf space most people dedicate to supplement bottles in their bathroom cabinet. The total cost of seeds and starter plants for all 20 is roughly what you would pay for 60 days of a premium gut health supplement subscription. The subscription expires every month, and the plants come back every year. Some of them come back stronger. This is not conspiracy. This is economics. Companies fund what they can patent, and they market what they can mark up. A plant that grows on a balcony and returns every spring cannot be patented. It cannot be controlled. It cannot generate recurring subscription revenue. A bottle of turmeric capsules sells for $25 and lasts 30 days. A turmeric rhizome in a pot costs $3 and lasts forever. A bottle of peppermint oil capsules sells for $18. A peppermint plant in a pot costs $2 and produces more oil than you could use in a year. The math is simple. The business model depends on you not doing it. The knowledge about these plants existed for centuries across every culture on Earth. Indian grandmothers brew turmeric into golden milk. Greek grandmothers dry chamomile on the windowsill. Japanese families slice burdock root for dinner. French families eat dandelion greens in spring. Mexican families chew fennel seeds. Ethiopian mothers stir fenugreek into stews for new mothers. Korean families have used these plants so long that the traditions have no origin story. They simply always were. The knowledge was never hidden. It was just never profitable to share. The supplement aisle replaced the garden. The capsule replaced the tea. The brand name replaced the plant name. 3 generations grew up reaching for a bottle instead of reaching for the soil. Not because anyone lied to them, but because the system that sells bottles has a marketing budget and the garden does not. But you know now. You know the plants, you know the mechanisms, you know that coating, inflammation, bacteria, bile, and nerve calming are not 5 separate problems requiring 5 separate supplements. They are 5 functions that 20 plants have performed together on balconies and in kitchen gardens for longer than modern medicine has existed. Your grandmother did not call it a gut healing protocol, she called it the garden. She brewed chamomile when your stomach hurt. She chewed fennel seeds after a heavy meal. She made dandelion tea in spring, dried calendula petals in summer, and hung peppermint in the kitchen doorway. She did not read a clinical trial. She did not need to. The knowledge came from her mother. Who got it from her mother? Who got it from hers? Somewhere along the way, the chain broke. The garden became a lawn. The tea became a capsule. The knowledge became a product. 20 plants, 1 balcony. A pharmacy that replants itself, costs almost nothing, and works the same way it worked for the people who first discovered it. Centuries before anyone tried to put it in a capsule and sell it back to you, the plants do not care who sells them. They do not care who forgot them. They just grow. They have been growing for thousands of years, and if you give them a pot and a little water, they will grow for you too. Walk into any pharmacy in America tonight, walk past the cold medicine aisle, walk past the vitamins, and you will find an entire section dedicated to gut health. Rows of plastic bottles with clean labels promise billions of living organisms inside. Capsules sealed in blister packs, powders in single-serve sachets, gummies shaped like fruit. The packaging is polished. The promises are enormous, and the prices will make your wallet hurt. The global probiotics market crossed $77 billion in 2025. Analysts project it will more than double within the next decade. The supplement segment alone generates billions every single year. Fish oil had its era. Protein powder had its era. Probiotics are the current gold rush. And just like every gold rush, someone is getting rich while everybody else keeps digging. Here is what most people never realize about those capsules. Your gut contains roughly 30 to 40 trillion microorganisms, hundreds of different species, an entire ecosystem more complex than a coral reef. The average probiotic supplement contains between 1 and 10 bacterial strains, 1 to 10. That is like trying to restore a rainforest by planting 3 saplings in a parking lot and hoping the jungle figures itself out. But the problem runs deeper than strain count. The bacteria inside that capsule are freeze-dried. They were alive once, inside a sterile factory under controlled conditions. Then they were frozen, dried, pressed into powder, packed into gelatin shells, sealed in plastic bottles, loaded onto trucks, shipped across the country, and placed on a shelf under fluorescent lights. By the time you swallow one with your morning coffee, those organisms have endured manufacturing, months of storage, your stomach acid, and your bile. Many of them do not survive the trip. Viability drops during storage, especially without refrigeration. You are paying for a promise that biology cannot always keep. The average American household spends between $100 and $300 per year on probiotic supplements. That is a monthly expense, a subscription, an auto refill that charges your card whether you remember to take the capsule or not. The industry depends on you coming back every 30 days. It depends on you never learning that the same bacteria in far greater diversity and in a living state can come from a jar you make in your own kitchen for the cost of a vegetable and a spoonful of salt. Now consider the economics. You cannot patent salt. You cannot patent a glass jar. You cannot patent the bacteria that already live on the skin of a vegetable pulled from your garden 10 minutes ago. A crop that you grow yourself cannot generate supplement revenue. A fermentation process that needs no factory cannot generate processing fees. A living food that keeps for months in your refrigerator cannot generate monthly subscription income. Every single jar of homemade fermented vegetables is a canceled subscription, and canceled subscriptions are what keeps supplement executives awake at night. Now step back 8,000 years, long before pharmacies, long before gelatin capsules, marketing budgets, or wellness influencers. Somewhere in what is now northern China, around 7000 BCE, people were already fermenting food. Archaeologists found the chemical residue in ancient pottery, fermented rice, fermented fruit, fermented honey. The oldest evidence of deliberate fermentation on Earth is older than the pyramids by more than 4,000 years. They did not know what bacteria were. They had no microscopes and no understanding of microbiology. But they understood something simpler and far more powerful. Food that bubbles lasts longer, and people who eat it get sick less often. That single observation, repeated across thousands of years on every inhabited continent, built the foundation of the most widespread food preservation method in human history. In Korea, families have been fermenting vegetables for over 2,000 years. Every autumn, entire neighborhoods still gather for kimjang, the communal preparation of fermented vegetables for the long winter ahead. The tradition is so deeply woven into daily life that the United Nations recognized it as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Not a museum exhibit, but a living practice carried out by millions of Korean families every single year. In Germany and across Eastern Europe, stone cellars held oak barrels packed with salted fermented cabbage. Sailors loaded those barrels onto ships to prevent scurvy on long voyages because fermentation preserved the vitamin C that cooking destroys. Captain James Cook carried fermented cabbage across the Pacific Ocean. Entire naval fleets survived on it. In Japan, neighborhood shops have specialized in rice bran fermented pickles for centuries. In India, regional fermentation traditions number in the hundreds, each adapted to local climate and local ingredients. In Mexico, fermented vegetable condiments accompany rural meals just as they did generations ago. In West Africa, fermented plant foods still form the backbone of traditional diets. Every civilization with agriculture discovered fermentation independently, not because they communicated across oceans, but because the biology is universal. Salt suppresses harmful bacteria, while beneficial bacteria already living on the surface of fresh vegetables thrive in that salty environment. They produce lactic acid, which preserves the food for months. The flavor deepens, the texture changes, and the bacterial population explodes into a complex living ecosystem inside the jar. Modern science finally measured what those civilizations practiced by instinct. A single batch of naturally fermented vegetables can harbor up to 28 distinct bacterial strains, multiple species working in a living community. Some produce lactic acid to preserve the food, some generate B vitamins, some break down fiber into short-chain fatty acids that feed the cells lining your intestinal wall. Some compete directly against harmful organisms and crowd them out. This is not a supplement. This is a living ecology in a jar. No factory on Earth replicates what a vegetable, salt, and 7 days on a kitchen counter can accomplish. Now here are the 5 plants. Every single one grows in a home garden. Every single one ferments with nothing more than salt and water. And every single one produces a living probiotic food that outperforms the capsule sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now. The first plant is one you already know. It grows on a vine in the heat of summer and produces the green fruit that Americans slice into salads, float in water pitchers, and most importantly, turn into pickles. But here's the truth that almost nobody understands. Most pickles sold in grocery stores across America are not fermented at all. They are cucumbers soaked in vinegar. Read the label next time you're in the condiment aisle. Vinegar, water, salt, preservatives, yellow dye, no living bacteria, no probiotic benefit whatsoever. Those jars are preserved, not fermented. 2 completely different processes, producing 2 completely different results. The real fermented pickle, the kind that sat in ceramic crocks in your great-grandmother's root cellar, uses only cucumbers, water, salt, and thyme. No vinegar, no preservatives. The bacteria already living on the cucumber skin do the work. Within days, lactobacillus species dominate the jar. These are the exact same organisms that supplement companies isolate, freeze dry, and sell back to you at a $40 markup. One strain in particular, Lactobacillus plantarum, survives the acid in your stomach, reaches your intestine alive, strengthens the gut barrier, and actively fights harmful organisms. It is one of the most studied probiotic bacteria in modern science, and it grows for free on the skin of a cucumber hanging off a backyard trellis. Growing cucumbers is one of the simplest warm season tasks in any garden. Sow seeds after the last frost, give them a fence or a trellis to climb, water consistently. In 50 to 60 days, you are harvesting. For fermentation, pack fresh cucumbers into a wide-mouth glass jar with a few cloves of garlic and a handful of fresh dill. Dissolve about 2 tablespoons of sea salt in a quart of water and pour the brine over the cucumbers until they are fully submerged. Cover the jar loosely, leave it on the counter for 3 to 7 days. When you see bubbles rising through the brine, the bacteria are working. Move the jar to the refrigerator. It now contains billions of living probiotic organisms. Total cost: 1 cucumber, a clove of garlic, and a pinch of salt. But the next plant makes the cucumber jar look modest. This single vegetable, when fermented, produces the highest bacterial diversity of any common fermented food ever measured. And a serving as small as 2 tablespoons delivers enough living organisms to match what you get from a probiotic capsule costing $2 a day. Cabbage. When you shred cabbage and add salt, a microbial succession unfolds over the following weeks that scientists have studied for decades. First, one bacterial group dominates and begins producing carbon dioxide and lactic acid. Then a second group takes over and deepens the acidity. Finally, Lactobacillus plantarum rises to dominance and stabilizes the entire community. Researchers have documented up to 28 distinct strains in a single batch of fermented cabbage. No supplement on any shelf in any pharmacy on this continent comes close to that diversity. In Germany and Eastern Europe, this fermented cabbage is called sauerkraut. Families packed it into barrels every autumn and stored it in root cellars where it fed them through the coldest months of winter. Sailors loaded it onto ships in Hamburg and Amsterdam, and they did not develop scurvy because fermentation preserved what cooking would have destroyed. In Korea, the same vegetable fermented with chili flakes, garlic, ginger, and scallion becomes kimchi. Korean families have been making it for over 2,000 years. A typical Korean household eats it at every single meal: breakfast, lunch, dinner, weddings and funerals, holidays, and ordinary afternoons. Walk through the Gwangjang market in Seoul, and you will see vendors with enormous tubs of freshly made kimchi stacked on folding tables. Shoppers stop and taste samples without breaking stride because kimchi is as ordinary to them as bread is to a French family. Half a cup contains approximately 11.5 billion colony-forming units of living bacteria. That is more than most bottles on the supplement shelf. Growing cabbage is straightforward even for beginners. It loves cool weather and handles frost without complaint. Start seeds indoors or sow directly in early spring or late summer. Harvest when the heads feel firm and heavy. For sauerkraut, shred the cabbage finely and add 2% salt by weight. Massage the shredded leaves with your hands until liquid pools at the bottom of the bowl. Pack it tightly into a glass jar and press it down until the brine covers the surface. Ferment at room temperature for 1 to 4 weeks depending on your taste. For kimchi, toss the salted cabbage with chili flakes, minced garlic, grated ginger, and chopped scallion. Pack tightly and ferment for 3 to 7 days before moving the jar to the refrigerator. Both preparations keep for months. The bacteria stay alive the entire time. Now, there is a fermented drink from Eastern Europe that does something none of these jar foods can do alone. It works on an organ you probably never connect with the word probiotics: your liver. The plant is the beet. The drink is called kvass. In Russia, Ukraine, and Poland, beet kvass has been a household tonic for generations. Grandmothers in villages outside Kyiv and Krakow made it the same way their grandmothers taught them. The preparation is almost absurdly simple. Dice 2 or 3 beets, place them in a glass jar, add a teaspoon of sea salt and fill with clean water. Cover loosely, wait 3 to 5 days. The result is a deep crimson liquid alive with probiotic bacteria and loaded with betalains, the pigment compounds that give beets their blood red color. Betalains are powerful. They reduce inflammation and neutralize oxidative stress throughout the body. But here is what makes beet kvass different from every other fermented food on this list. Your gut and your liver are directly connected by a blood vessel called the portal vein. Everything your intestines absorb travels through the liver before it reaches the rest of your body. When the probiotic bacteria in kvass strengthen your gut lining, they reduce the toxic load reaching your liver through that vein. And the betalains and betaine naturally present in the beets support the liver's own detoxification processes. 1 drink, 2 organs, 1 direct biological connection. The fermentation process converts most of the natural sugar in the beets into food for the bacteria. A 6-ounce glass of finished kvass contains roughly 1 gram of sugar. Compare that to a glass of commercial fruit juice at 25 grams or more. Growing beets takes almost no effort. They are a cool season root crop that tolerates a wide range of soil and weather. Sow seeds directly into garden soil in early spring or late summer. Thin the seedlings to about 3 inches apart. Harvest in 50 to 70 days when the tops of the roots push above the soil line. For kvass, dice the beets and place them in a quart mason jar with a teaspoon of sea salt and filtered water. Add a few slices of fresh ginger if you like. Ferment at room temperature for 3 to 5 days until the liquid turns a deep red and tastes pleasantly sour. Strain and refrigerate. Drink 3 to 4 ounces before meals. The leftover beet pieces can be used for a second, weaker batch. Nothing goes to waste. The next plant does something the other 4 cannot. It fights inflammation from 2 directions at once. It does so through living probiotic bacteria and through a molecule that medical researchers have studied for decades across hundreds of papers. No supplement on the market combines these 2 mechanisms, but one fermented food does: the hot pepper. The molecule is capsaicin. It creates the burning sensation on your tongue. But capsaicin does far more than produce heat. It reduces inflammation. It supports healthy metabolism. It acts as an antioxidant. Now combine those effects with the probiotic bacteria that develop during fermentation, and you get a food that attacks chronic inflammation from 2 completely different directions at the same time. In Korea, this combination has existed for centuries in a thick fermented chili paste called gochujang. It shows up in kitchens and restaurants across the entire country. When researchers studied traditionally fermented gochujang, they found something striking. The fermented version protected against intestinal inflammation, reduced key inflammatory signals in the body, and supported the growth of beneficial gut bacteria. The critical discovery was that the fermented paste significantly outperformed the unfermented version in every single measurement. Without fermentation, it is just spicy paste. With fermentation, it becomes a delivery system for both capsaicin and living bacteria working together. The process itself is what unlocks the power. Growing hot peppers takes warmth and patience. Start seeds indoors about 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost date. Transplant seedlings outside once the soil is warm. Harvest when the peppers reach full color. For fermented hot sauce, blend your peppers with fresh garlic and 3 to 5% salt by weight. Pack the mixture into a glass jar with some headspace at the top. Cover loosely. Ferment at room temperature for 5 to 14 days, opening the jar daily to release gas and stir. After fermentation, blend until smooth and bottle in the refrigerator. Every bottle is alive. The flavor deepens over weeks. The cost is a handful of peppers and a clove of garlic. The 5th plant is the one almost no Western gardener thinks to ferment, but in Korea, it is fermented more often than cabbage itself. In Japan, it is pressed into rice bran and aged for months in ceramic crocks. In China, It anchors an entire regional pickling tradition that stretches back centuries, and it grows faster than anything else in your garden. The radish. In Korea, cubed radish fermented with chili, garlic, ginger, and a touch of fish sauce is called kakdugi. It appears at nearly every meal right alongside cabbage kimchi. But it is not a duplicate. Different vegetables produce different bacterial communities during fermentation. The sugars in the radish, the microbes on its skin, the salt concentration, the surrounding temperature, all of these create a unique microbial fingerprint. A jar of fermented radish complements fermented cabbage the way two instruments complement each other in the same orchestra. Similar principles, different contributions. Together, something richer than either one alone. In Japan, large white daikon radish is salted, pressed, and aged in beds of rice bran to create a fermented pickle called takwon. The aging process can last for months, developing deep savory flavors and a dense bacterial population. In the Sichuan province of China, radish is a core ingredient in pao kai, a fermented vegetable tradition kept alive in ceramic vessels that families maintain for years, adding fresh vegetables and drawing out fermented ones in a continuous living cycle. In India, radish achar ferments with mustard oil and spices under the midday sun. One vegetable, 4 countries, 4 distinct fermentation traditions, 4 unique communities of living bacteria. This diversity is the entire point. Gut health research does not point toward one magic strain or one perfect capsule. It points toward variety. The more diverse the bacteria in your gut, the more resilient your entire system becomes. A garden producing 5 different fermented foods across the seasons is not just a food source. It is a rotating probiotic pharmacy where every jar introduces a different living community to your gut throughout the year. Radishes are the fastest crop in any garden. Some varieties mature in 25 days from seed to harvest. Larger daikon types need 50 to 60 days. Sow seeds directly into cool soil in spring or fall. They barely need attention. For kakdugi style fermentation, cube the radish and toss with salt, chili flakes, minced garlic, grated ginger, and a splash of fish sauce. Pack tightly into a glass jar. Ferment at room temperature for 2 to 4 days. For a simpler version, slice the radish and submerge in a 3% salt brine. Ferment for 5 to 7 days. Both methods produce living probiotic food from a crop that practically grows itself. Now step back and look at what just happened. 5 plants, 5 fermentation methods. All of them require nothing more than a garden, a glass jar, salt, and water. No factory involved, no patent required, no credit card on file for monthly auto refill. This is the economic reality that the supplement industry does not discuss. You cannot patent salt. You cannot patent a mason jar. You cannot patent a biological process that has been occurring on the surface of vegetables since before humans walked the earth. Lactofermentation is not an invention. It is a natural phenomenon, and natural phenomena cannot be owned. What cannot be owned cannot be sold at a premium. What cannot be sold at a premium does not fund a marketing department, and what does not get marketed never enters your consciousness. Search any medical research database for probiotic supplements, and you will find tens of thousands of studies, many funded by the companies that sell the capsules. Now search for homemade fermented vegetables probiotics, and the number drops dramatically. This is not because fermented vegetables work less, it is because fermented vegetables have no corporate sponsor. The studies that exist come primarily from Korean government research institutions, Japanese universities, and Chinese food science programs. The knowledge is documented, but it lives in languages and journals that Western supplement companies have zero incentive to translate or publicize. The pattern is identical to every suppressed plant this channel has ever covered. What cannot generate recurring revenue does not attract research funding. What does not get researched does not get recommended. What does not get recommended does not get known. 3 generations of Westerners grew up believing that gut health comes from a capsule, because nobody profits from telling you it comes from a glass jar on your kitchen counter. But the walls are cracking. Fermentation communities are growing every single month. Korean cooking channels have already taught millions of Westerners to make kimchi at home. Seed catalogs now feature dedicated sections for pickling and fermenting varieties. The information that took decades of industry dominance to bury is taking only years of shared knowledge to dig back up. Here is your plan. 5 plants, 1 growing season, a lifetime of living probiotic food. In early spring, when the soil is still cool, plant cabbage and radish. Both tolerate frost. Both grow fast. By late spring, the radishes are ready to harvest and ferment within days. The cabbage heads will be firm and dense by early summer. After your last frost date, when the soil warms up, plant cucumbers and hot peppers. Cucumbers produce in 50 to 60 days. Peppers take 70 to 90 days to reach full maturity. Both will keep producing through summer and into early fall. Beets go in the ground in either spring or late summer. They adapt easily. Harvest in 50 to 70 days. All 5 plants fit in a single raised bed. They fit in 5-gallon buckets on a balcony. They fit in containers on a porch. Total seed cost for all 5 is under $20. Total fermentation equipment is glass jars, sea salt, and water you already have. As each crop comes in, fermentation begins. Spring radish ferments within days. Summer cucumbers ferment within a week. Late summer cabbage becomes sauerkraut or kimchi by autumn. Fall beets become kvass in under a week. Late harvest peppers become fermented hot sauce that only improves through winter. By the end of 1 growing season, your refrigerator holds 5 different jars of living probiotic food. Each jar contains a unique bacterial community. Each one works differently inside your gut. Together, they deliver more microbial diversity than any supplement bottle on any pharmacy shelf in the country. Save seeds from every crop. Cucumbers produce seeds freely. Let a few radishes bolt, and they will give you hundreds of seeds for the following year. Peppers dry easily on a windowsill. Cabbage and beet seed saving takes a bit more patience, but it is simple enough. Within 2 growing seasons, you are no longer buying seeds. You are no longer buying supplements. The garden feeds the jars. The jars feed the gut. The gut feeds the body. And the whole system costs nothing but a little time, a little attention, and a spoonful of salt. The question was never why traditional cultures ferment their food. They fermented because it worked. The food lasted longer. The people who ate it survived brutal winters and tropical summers and centuries without refrigeration, without pharmacies, without monthly subscriptions arriving at front doors. The real question is why the modern world chose to forget, and the answer is not conspiracy. The answer is economics. What cannot be owned cannot be sold. What cannot be sold does not get advertised. What does not get advertised disappears from public memory within a single generation. But the bacteria do not care about revenue models. They care about salt concentration and temperature. They have been fermenting food on the surface of vegetables since long before humans existed. They will keep doing it long after the supplement industry reinvents itself for the 10th time. The only question is whether the jar on your kitchen counter will be one of them. 5 plants, 5 jars, 1 season, and then years of living food from a process so ancient and so simple that your ancestors practiced it without electricity, without science, without knowing a single bacterial name. They just knew the food in the crock kept them well, and it will keep you well too.
The science confirmed what traditional knowledge preserved for centuries. The most powerful antibacterial compounds on Earth require no prescription, no insurance, and no appointment. They grow in forest soil, on Mediterranean hillsides, on chain-link fences in the Caribbean, and in kitchen gardens on every continent. The industries profit when you forget what grows for free. These plants never disappeared. We were just taught to stop looking.